Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto leaves Team 7 and joins Anbu Part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for Part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. The groceries felt heavy in her arms. The load was light, merely a fresh container of milk, a carton of eggs, and the tasteless, stringy cheese she liked to pull apart as she read medical scrolls. Just a quick run for food. Maybe tomorrow she would scrounge up the willpower to restock her dried goods and non-perishables. No point in buying more than a day's worth of anything that wouldn't last more than a month on its own. Clutching her purchases a little tighter to her chest, she ignored the late afternoon crowd that was flowing around her. Instead, her eyes were locked onto a man whose back was to her, hands jammed into his pockets in an impatient gesture, head cocked to the side as he looked for someone. Naruto. Biting her lip, she tried to think of the last time she had seen him for more than a brief hello in the hallway to the Hokage's office. Even then, the hello was short, punctured by the flash of his familiar smile before he went in and she went out. 6 months? His trial into Anbu had been almost 7 months ago, and then there had been that quiet gathering at Lee's. Reaching up with her free hand, she rubbed her aching forehead. 6 months was the longest time since their separation as teens that they had been apart on a mission. She spent too much of her time poring over medical scrolls, too many hours in a hospital perfecting her techniques. He was gone on mission so often she had stopped watering his plants, and had just moved them into her place. She could count on her hand the number of times they had sparred lately. She needed the space. Needed to find her own footing and to prove to herself that everything was okay now. She thought that might have been why Naruto had joined Anbu. Adjusting her grip on her bag, ignoring the faintest fluttering in her gut, she moved in the direction of the blonde. She had needed the space, but 6 months of it was more than enough, even for her. He turned not 5 steps into her walk, smile firmly in place. An exasperated frown tugged lightly on her lips. She wondered how long he had been waiting for her to notice him, to make the first move in his direction. The blonde would never learn tact, but had started to learn a little patience. Sakura-chan. His smile was bright enough to hurt her eyes. Naruto, she bumped her shoulder with his as he stepped next to her, matching the rhythm of his movements to hers as he joined her in her walk. I didn't know you were back in town. All I bought was milk and eggs. Up close, he looked dirty, worn around the edges. His eyes still sparkled. Sighing at his smile, she shoved the bags from her hands into his, and the smile in his eyes widened. Sticking out her tongue, she ran her hands through her hair. I might have some ramen. Peeking at him out of the corner of her eye, she made her decision. She just wondered if he had made his. You've changed things. Sakura turned in surprise as she set the bag on the counter. Frowning, she considered the inside of the apartment. She had rearranged a few things, finally splurging on some color, but she hadn't thought Naruto would notice. She hadn't considered Naruto at all when making the changes. A new potted plant, eventually he was going to take his back, a few extra pillows, a blanket across the back of the couch. Color. I had the time. He nodded, accepting her explanation. One day she had sat down on her couch and realized how bare her place was compared to, say, Ino's. Sakura wasn't interested in clutter and window shades that matched her eyes. She was too much a minimalist. Had spent too much of her time obsessing at a single goal to particularly care about the things around her. Some of that intensity had faded, and she was becoming aware of more than just her mission. More than just Sasuke. That was what had taken so much time to adjust to. This new awareness. Brows lowering as she watched Naruto pace the living room, his roaming as if he was looking for something in particular, she finally shrugged and unloaded her purchases. Rising onto tiptoe, she found the last of her ramen stash. She really only kept it for Naruto. It never tasted the same when she was by herself. Did your mission go well? Well enough. No one had died this time then. The first time someone had died in Naruto's squad, she had woken up to him sitting on the edge of the bed, watching her sleep. They were both lucky he was as quick as he was, or that kunai would have done a lot more damage. He had spent that night, and several others on her couch, but that first night she had sat on the floor with him until her knees ached. He never stayed long, he was usually gone by the time she crawled out of her shower, and the blanket he had used had been folded perfect and set on the coffee table. She had never pressed him for details, knowing that when he was ready to talk he would. A wry smile curved her mouth. Unlike someone else, who they still had to tie down to get answers from. Sakura studied Naruto as the water boiled for tea and ramen. His eyes were shadowed again. Something might not have happened on the mission, but something was bothering him. Outside of the death of teammates, there were only a few things that actually got beneath his skin. Contrary to what their friends thought, he was capable of keeping things to himself. He just didn't see the need very often. Naruto was too honest to lie to anyone but himself, and he usually gave up on that after a while. Occasionally she still needed to shake him until his brains rattled enough to get his thoughts in order. She forgave him for his occasional stupidity because he never questioned her right to guard his back. Still, of all the topics that he refused to speak about, Sasuke was usually at the top of his list. Turning her back on her friend, she busied her unloading her dishes. She needed to do something with her hands while she figured this out, and if Naruto followed his normal behavior patterns, he would be content to just watch while she thought. How is Sasuke? Then again, maybe not. She bit the inside of her lip before answering, wondering at the question. I thought you would have stopped in to say hi before you found me. Naruto was suspiciously silent. Hands pausing above a cup, she turned and studied him. Naruto, are you all right? The blonde looked away, his face suddenly tired. What? His expression cleared and he offered her another of those smiles. I need to use your shower. Lowering her brows in fair warning that she wouldn't drop it forever, she nodded. He slipped off the stool. Towels are in the same place, and your change of clothing is clean and in the same drawer. Thanks, Sakura-chan. Biting her lip, she moved the kettle away from the heat. No, Naruto, no need for hot water, and she could live without her cup of tea. Pressing her back against the counter, she studied the place where he had been sitting. Something was obviously on his mind if he had chosen a shower over his precious stomach. He wasn't operating on standard Naruto patterns. The Naruto who had trained himself into exhaustion for his best friend ate, slept, and only showered when he had the energy to realize how he smelled. So Naruto was having a hard time with something. It had to be Sasuke. It was always Sasuke, well, when it wasn't her. Picking up a scrub brush, she went to work on her soaking dishes. Sasuke. He had been home for a year now. Surely that was enough time for those two to find their footing again. The same way you found yours. Chewing on her lip hard enough to hurt, she attacked her dishes. Naruto had been missing for the last 6 months. Missions. Sasuke had been grounded to the village and nowhere else. When would they have had time to work things out? Sasuke was just now getting comfortable enough to look at her in public. The bastard. She sighed. It had only been a year. A year compared to the years spent without them. Things were different. But different was okay. As much as Sasuke had changed, how different he was from the experience, how difficult it was to get him to sleep or even eat, it had never occurred to her that she might have changed as well. Not until she had stood in his shadow struggling to place where she belonged in his life now. She knew she was stronger, fitter, smarter, and capable. She would never have to watch him walk away again. She had proven it to herself, and to him. She just hadn't realized how much her perceptions of the world had changed. How much her perception of perfection, her team, Sasuke, and her childhood had barred her ability to see the truth, and in that truth, herself. Herself and more importantly, the truth about the relationships around her, and with Sasuke home the blinders came off. She had spent 2 days hiding in her bedroom, working out the new mental paths before Naruto had been released from the hospital. He had shown up, pale and wavering on his feet, demanding ramen and her company. She had gone. She kicked the dishwasher shut, listening to the sound of the water running, and promised herself she would turn it on later. That had been the last time she had actually had time to see Naruto do something other than sleep, eat, and sleep again. Naruto had been accepting mission after mission, hardly finding time to rest. She had asked Tsunade quietly if it had something to do with the death of Orochimaru, and the older woman had shook her head without offering anything else. It was almost as if he wanted to be as far away from Kanoho and Sasuke as possible for some reason. Reaching upwards, she dragged her hand through her bangs. She didn't understand what it was that would drive her friend away. Eyes narrowing in thought, she decided that if he wanted to even look at the ramen on her stove, he was going to have to talk to her about his problem. Or else. That's a scary look. Lifting her head, she pointed a finger at him, her lips parting to demand answers, but the words froze on her lips. His shirt was old enough that it stretched across his shoulders comfortably. He was barefoot. Sakura had a weakness for men with bare feet, and there had always been something strangely appealing about a freshly washed Naruto. He quirked a brow in question, his eyes darkening to midnight as he watched her, and desperately, she reacted. What the hell is your problem, Uzumaki? Okay, not exactly what she had planned on shouting, but it worked, and his eyes lightened with surprise. When dealing with her friend's strange ability for emotional insight, it was best to just wallop him when he wasn't expecting it. Blue eyes blinked rapidly. Huh? Pressing one fist on her hip, and not caring that it made her look confrontational, she frowned at him. Where the hell have you been? Those wide eyes were confused, on missions. Exactly. Jerking around, she slammed the kettle back onto the stove. On missions. Not even 2 weeks after almost getting yourself killed, you decide to take off with your new Anbu status and try to get yourself killed in a completely new fashion. She could feel his confusion fade into hesitation. To her surprise, that hesitation shifted into determination. Peeking over her shoulder as the water started to heat again, she considered the line of his jaw. Time to interrupt his thought process. I know I told you I was alright with someone else watching your back, Naruto, because I wasn't ready or willing to join Anbu to do it for you, but you do remember that I withheld the right to kick your ass if you did something stupid, right? He took a slow breath, and the line of his jaw eased. I needed to be out doing things, Sakura. It was hard. She nodded. At least he was talking about it. Sasuke. She ignored the way he stiffened a little. Yes. He is alright, Naruto. There are going to be lingering effects, things won't ever be the same. The wistful note in her voice was only partly mocking. But that's okay. We're still Team 7. It's okay? She twisted around and frowned. It was possible that Naruto was involved in a completely different conversation than she was. It had happened before. Best to put his feet squarely on the path she wanted then. Too many conversations had ended badly because of miscommunications. You mean you don't want to be Team 7 anymore? His eyes huge, Sakura. She bit her tongue to keep from smiling. Too easy. Okay, so that was a bit low. Tell me, Naruto, why haven't you talked to Sasuke? I needed time. For what? Stuff. The tea kettle hissed, and she poured the hot water into the 2 plastic cups. Her brow furrowed as she tried to think that one through. Stuff? What stuff? Sakura, his tone was careful. Have you and Sasuke talked about your own stuff? You mean my undying affection? Her back was turned so she missed his reaction, but she heard his intake of breath. Yeah. Sasuke, she allowed her voice to soften, staring down into the cup of noodles. Sasuke, I don't know who changed, Naruto. I just can't tell. I mean, we both have changed, but I don't know when it changed. There was a long pause. Changed? It isn't so much that he isn't the man that I thought he was. He is, even if it's buried under scars and lies, but something has changed. I just can't tell if it's me or if it's him. Is that okay? It would be damn uncomfortable if he was even remotely in love with me, she muttered in a rush. Grabbing a pair of chopsticks, she shoved the first cup into his hands. To her surprise, he barely caught it, his face slack with shock. It took a few seconds to pour and stir her cup, and when she turned, his features had the normal wonder and delights from his precious ramen. It was always best to have ramen in front of him when she had something life-altering to admit to. She sighed in pleasure when she finally sat down. The silence between them was comfortable as they tiredly ate. Once she felt the edge of her hunger abate, she started talking again. I think I'm a horrible person. It felt good to admit that. Naruto coughed, his forearm banging painfully against the table as he tried to clear his lungs. She hurried on to explain before he could get the breath to argue with her, because he would have. You probably know better than anyone why I chased after him. You chased after him because you promised me, and it was over something that I'm not sure ever existed. I don't love him. Her tone was resigned, soft. Sakura. Do you know how long it took me to realize that? She refused to look at him. Sakura-chan. She ignored his second attempt to interrupt. I spent so many years of my life chasing the damn man so I could drag him back by his hair to realize that life was here. With us, he could have had a life. I finally have him in reach and nothing. I have nothing. Which I promptly tried to ignore, because that had to be love, right? You don't just throw away so many years of your life without loving someone. His eyes were wide with shock, but there was warmth there as well. She needed that. Taking a shuddering breath, she sighed, lowering her eyes. She had needed to tell him that, but now it was time to point this conversation back where it belonged. She could just drown herself in the shower later. Sasuke needs you, Naruto. I'm still fumbling for ways to help him. We're attempting to become friends. You are his friend. He needs you to be here. You're his friend too, Sakura-chan. Maybe, but I think you're the better one out of the two of us. You never wanted anything from him besides friendship. I'm still trying to deal with the fact that I love him as my brother and teammate, only. It was terrifying, thinking that those emotions she had poured into Sasuke might have just been friendship. Perhaps it had been love at one time, and she had just burned them into ashes. Naruto's tone was soft. That's not true. What's not true? That I never wanted something from him. What? His smile was slightly pained, but there was such hope in his expression that she blinked. It doesn't matter now. So Sasuke needs me, does he? He won't admit it. Then I suppose I'll just have to beat it out of him. Laughter burbled in her chest. He is still on house arrest. He can't train yet. The day I can't get around some old fogies to spar with my best friend is the day I kissed the old hag. Sakura snorted at that mental image. You're one of those old fogies now, Mr. Anbu. He stuck his tongue out and went back to his ramen. Sakura went back to her own noodles, her appetite revived. Naruto hadn't mocked her, hadn't told her that yes, she had to love Sasuke. Ino certainly had. There was a sort of understanding in his face that warmed her as she finished her meal. It was good to have him home. Sakura waved to the blonde bouncing impatiently on her heels. Ino was looking impatient, and she couldn't blame her. She was running behind this afternoon. Ino! I'm sorry I'm so late. The medical examinations took so much longer than I thought they would. She apologized as she stepped up next to her friend. Ino lifted a brow as she turned, her expression amused. One of these days you are going to have to learn how to tell Tsunade no, you know. I know, Sakura said sheepishly as the girls walked into their favorite tempura restaurant. But it's only for another 2 weeks and then things will be slowing down a little. Or at least that's what I am hoping. I'm going to have to take a mission to get some rest if it doesn't. I'm surprised they even let you out of that dungeon for lunch with me, Ino teased. It's not that bad, Sakura scolded. It's just busy. Ino snorted, but said nothing else as the waiter appeared to take their orders. They hurriedly scanned the menu. Shikamaru said that Naruto was back in town. He came by the other night, Sakura agreed, sipping her cold tea with a sigh. It was getting so hot already. This summer was going to be miserable. I haven't gotten a chance to talk to him since then. I think he left this morning to go on another mission. I'm not sure. Shikamaru didn't mention him going on a mission. He did say that Naruto was taking a lighter load of missions. Ino stared at her. Do you know anything about that? We talked about some things, Sakura admitted. It was mostly me doing the talking, but I was under the impression that he would be slowing down a little. Naruto is just the type that he has to have something to focus all his energy on at one time, or he starts to get antsy. I don't think that's it, Ino mused, leaning back with a thoughtful look on her face. Did you explain to him what was going on with you and Sasuke? Nothing is going on with me and Sasuke, Sakura pointed out, rolling her eyes. Exactly? Sakura frowned at her friend. I don't understand what you are trying to say. Ino waved her hand. Don't worry about it. It's not that big of a deal. Sakura shrugged. Okay. Did Shikamaru say when he thought the council would let Sasuke out of his house arrest? Ino gave her a weird look. I would have thought you would know before Shikamaru with Tsunade. Sakura shook her head. She is doing her best not to compromise her position by giving me information that the council would disapprove of. I'm doing my best to pretend I'm not interested. Ino shook her head in amusement. No, Shikamaru hasn't said anything, but I haven't asked either. I can ask him if you want. That's okay, Sakura said. I'm sure Naruto will fish the information out eventually. Ino nodded. So, speaking of Sasuke, now that you're over him and everything, have you been thinking about dating anyone else? Sakura swallowed her tea wrong and ended up coughing. What? It's a perfectly natural question, forehead girl, Ino said in exasperation. You don't want Sasuke anymore, so what do you want? I don't think Lee has given up on you yet. Sakura sighed. No, he hasn't. I'm sensing a but here. Sakura was saved from answering immediately with the arrival of the tempura. Ino gave her a knowing look as she took a large bite, but she ignored her friend as she tried to collect her thoughts. Figured that Ino would bring up a subject she hadn't even thought to consider yet. I don't know, she said finally. I mean, all my life it's been Sasuke. I wasn't even aware that there were possibilities outside of Sasuke until recently. Now that I know there are other possibilities, it's hard to find someone to match up to the standards he held, you know? Yes. I think so, Ino agreed. Well, I have an idea anyway. Shikamaru and I didn't exactly have this problem, but I was never as into Sasuke as you were. Sakura shrugged. It isn't just that. I need someone who can be my equal, Ino, both in strength and mentality, and that rather cuts the list in half. It just means you need to introduce yourself to a bunch of Anbu. Ino corrected with a grin. Surely someone there is strong enough to deal with you. Sakura snorted, and to her relief, the conversation died a little as they both tucked into their meal. The murmur of the crowd around her was relaxing, and the cold tea had woken her up enough to enjoy her meal. A flash of blonde out the window had her eyes flicking to the window, but she didn't see anyone she knew. Naruto is Anbu. The thought caught her completely off guard and she breathed deeply, glad that she hadn't had anything in her mouth. Ino gave her a look, and she hurried took a large bite of her tempura. What does that mean? Of course, Naruto is Anbu, he wants to be Hokage. He has to be the best. She scolded herself. She chewed rapidly, trying to control her confusion with distraction. Where had that thought come from? Surely, her subconscious didn't think that Naruto of all people was dateable. It was Naruto. Firmly taping down the thought, she turned back to Ino, determined to distract herself from those thoughts. She didn't have the patience to even think that thought through right then, and it was ridiculous anyway. Naruto was her friend. The quiet was mostly deceiving. The rooftop he was currently sprawled on was peaceful, even surrounded by agitated chakra of searching ANBU officers. Sasuke didn't appear to notice them, but that calm facade was as deceitful as his sexy no jutsu. It wouldn't surprise him at all if Sasuke was not only aware of the ANBU, but could probably recite their major abilities and skills. His friend was such a sneaky bastard. A cold fish, but sneaky when he chose to be. The idiots wouldn't think to look to the top of the Hokage's tower until after they had already left. We probably only have another half hour, Naruto said lazily, watching the stars twinkle. Perhaps. Sitting up, rolling muscles that burned a little from the sparring match with Sasuke, he lifted both hands and settled them behind his head comfortably. If only Sakura was here, this moment would be perfect. Well, if Sakura was here and Sasuke relaxed enough to give him more than one-word sentences. Sasuke was such a moody little bastard with the emotional depth of a ramen bowl. Sakura, it was better for Sakura to be getting sleep right now, with the way the old hag had been pushing everyone at the hospital. He really didn't see what she had seen in their teammate all those years. Sasuke was a friend, his teammate, someone he had fought for and would fight for again. He just couldn't imagine anyone actually wanting to marry the bastard. The smile on his lips grew as he remembered the conversation he had had with her those nights ago. Sakura wasn't in love with the emotionally stinted Uchiha, and he was one step closer to being the Hokage. Life was good. You look like an idiot. You're just jealous. The Uchiha grunted but said nothing. Naruto smirked for a moment before eyeing the man next to him. You're not interested in her, are you? Sakura might say she wasn't interested in Sasuke, but if Sasuke started to pursue her, then things could get tricky. He didn't want to lose either of them, and if Sakura chose Sasuke, he would bite his tongue and say nothing. Having lived with hope for the past week, it was a hard question to ask. Sakura is my teammate, Sasuke said firmly. Naruto frowned at him. She is my teammate too. Sasuke sighed. She is only my teammate. Oh. Well, that's good, because I'm going to marry her. You are a fool. Maybe, Naruto agreed, his smile widening. I don't really care though. She already trusts me, she knows I'm there for her. It's just a matter of time before she realizes everything else. Sasuke made a noise, but didn't say anything else, and Naruto stood. We should be heading back. Eventually one of those idiots is going to think to look here. A puff of smoke, and the roof was clear. Sakura wearily trudged her way down the street to her one-room apartment. She was so damn tired. Training ninja to be field medics was always difficult, but after the war with sound, it was necessary that they fill the ranks that were empty. Tsunade had decided that every genin team from now on have at least one member who knew the basics of healing jutsu, and it was putting a strain on the medics qualified to train. It took a minute to find her keys, and even longer, to get her tired fingers to work correctly to fit the key into the proper slot to open the door. Twisting the key twice, she let herself into the apartment. It was a simple deterrent to keep unwanted civilians out of her home. Collapsing onto her couch, she pressed her face into the soft fabric with the intent to block out the entire outside world. She wanted to melt into the fabric and pretend that she didn't have to go in for another double shift in the morning. She wanted to pretend that she had the energy to banish all her aches and pains, and that she wasn't completely depleted of chakra. The longer she sprawled, the better she felt. Lifting her head slightly, she stared at the cushion under her cheek. When did her cushion start smelling like Naruto again? He had been on what was a light duty compared to his early schedule since their talk in her kitchen. He only came here when he was upset about something. Usually. As far as she knew, he hadn't been in her apartment for close a month, the night she had fed him ramen. Her stomach growled, but Sakura ignored it and snuggled back into her couch. She was too tired to deal with dinner tonight. Napping for an hour or so before digging through her pantry for something simple seemed like the best plan. Tucking her cold feet under another cushion, she closed her eyes. Voices pulled her from her nap, and she did her best to ignore them. Instincts tugged at her, even as she placed the voices in her kitchen. Opening blurry eyes, she rubbed her face and forced herself to wake up. Pushing herself up, she stared stupidly at the blanket that fell off her shoulders to pool around her lap. Turning slightly, she found that her kitchen had indeed been invaded by her teammates. You think that will be enough? Naruto's voice was doubtful as he peered over Sasuke's shoulder. Sakura eats a lot more than she used to. The hag has been working her hard, and she sometimes skips meals. I bet she's hungry. Still groggy, she frowned at that. Naruto? Sasuke? Why are you in my kitchen? The blonde turned with a smile. We're cooking dinner. His expression was innocent and open. Sakura didn't trust him any further than Ino could throw him. One eyebrow arched up before she could help herself. Naruto could cook. He had lived his entire life on his own. Sasuke, well, she supposed Orochimaru hadn't been that good of a cook, and she doubted he would have trusted anyone to cook for him. His reaction to the hospital food that Naruto or Sakura hadn't brought him had been proof of that. Running her hands through her hair, she shoved the blanket off her lap and walked over to see what they were cooking. You're making okonomiyaki? She loved okonomiyaki with tuna. Her eyes flickered to the little bowls with ingredients, and she grinned. Naruto had remembered. Sasuke gave a curt nod. His eyes left the small pan he was frying the flat dough in. We ran into Ino. Naruto slung an arm around her shoulders, and she leaned against his frame easily. Ino? What did the blonde woman have to do with anything? She said you haven't been eating well, Naruto filled in, so we thought we would come over and cook dinner. The old hag has been taking up too much of your time. His fingers flexed against her shoulder. Sakura winced. She has been attempting to get all the newbies trained and out into the field as quickly as possible without sacrificing their training. The rest of us just have to work overtime. She poked him in the ribs, silently informing him what she thought of his worry. He winked at her, but she could see a faint glimmer of concern in his eyes. Normally, she would have added some chakra to that poke to prove her point. She was just too tired to do it right now. You're drained, Naruto muttered, frowning down at her. Sakura ignored him, scooting out from under his arm to peer around Sasuke at the pile of food. Her mouth watered in appreciation. I'm finished, Sasuke said, moving the hot pan into the sink, diffusing the tension she could feel building in Naruto behind her. Food. The food ended up piled on her coffee table so they could all sprawl out on the floor cushions and relax. Even Sasuke unbent enough to recline. It probably helped that her kitchen blocked them from the view of the windows. Leaning back with a sigh, her plate piled high, she let her couch support her back. Aren't you supposed to be on house arrest? Naruto grinned around a mouthful, but swallowed before he spoke. That's the other reason we came over. To celebrate. The old hag finally let him out of lockdown. Not that it was really working. Was it even working? No, Sasuke replied, his expression unconcerned as he took another bite of food. Sakura sighed, wondering what mischief her team had been getting to without her. She tried to be jealous, but she was too damn tired to work up the proper emotion. So when are they going to let you start taking missions? I'm restricted to D class for a year, Sasuke said with a shrug. After that I'm only allowed C class with supervision until the council decides that I'm trustworthy and not a flight risk. Whose supervision? Wiggling a little, she tried to find a more comfortable position against the couch. Anbu, Naruto replied as he reached for the last of the food. They might let me supervise since I proved I can kick his ass. Sasuke snorted. Naruto ignored him. The council is probably going to be as difficult as they can manage without completely undermining the hag's authority. Naruto finished. I expected the clans to be unhappy, I guess I just didn't expect them to be this. She struggled to find the words. Naruto muttered something under his breath that had Sakura swatting at him. He dodged her blow before scooting over and picking up her feet, setting them in his lap and digging his knuckles into her tight arches. She sighed in pleasure. I do not care what the council thinks, Sasuke said with a frown. My personal business isn't any of their concern. They're going to make it their business, Naruto told him, a frown on his face as he looked up at the ceiling. Our biggest problem is going to be the Hyuga clan. They have a lot of internal turmoil right now with the split to support Hinata or Hanabi. That affects me how? Naruto snorted and looked at his head. Don't be an ass. You know as well as I do how the Hyuga clan is, and what they will do to remain the most powerful clan. It's bred into all the little monsters they give birth to and only encouraged as they grow older. Your clan was always a direct threat to that. If they can find any excuse to keep you from restarting your clan, or putting you back on the council, they will. Sakura nodded. Tsunade has made a comment or two that makes me believe the council is split on several issues. Not just with you, Sasuke. Sasuke frowned at them. Who else is in on this little game of yours? Sakura threw a pillow at him and frowned at Naruto when he stopped rubbing her feet. His eyes were on Sasuke and she sighed, crossing her arms as she waited for him to start rubbing again. It's not a game, Sasuke, Naruto said firmly, his shoulders tensing slightly. The Uchiha crossed his arms. Then what is this? The angle of his body shifting, right hand curling a little in preparation for a fight. If you two start wrestling in my living room, I'm throwing you both out by your ears, Sakura warned. I want to be Hokage, Naruto said slowly, eyes on Sasuke as he slowly relaxed. In order to do that, I have to have the approval of the council. His smile was faintly bitter. They won't give it to a man who is a container for a demon, you know. No matter how strong I am. They think Sand is insane for allowing Gaara to rule. Sasuke continued to frown at him. In order for me to become Hokage, I need a council that will vote me in. Naruto continued, unabashed. For that to happen, I need allies. He pinned his best friend with a look. As long as the Hyuga clan keeps you off that council seat, that's one less chance I have. If I'm not Hokage, then we can't change anything. Before you start getting all huffy, Sakura warned, moving her foot in another silent attempt to continue the foot massage. That wasn't the sole reason we went after you. We want you back. It's just an added bonus that you come with a council seat. Sasuke looked away. I know. Sakura shared a grin with Naruto. That statement was definitely progress. To her delight, Naruto's shoulders relaxed a little more, and he went back to her abused feet. She sighed, letting her head fall back against the couch. If she could just get Sasuke to rub her shoulders while Naruto rubbed her feet, life would be perfect. It would never happen. We're going to have to be careful not to break the rules too much in the future. If we don't do anything, Tsunade might be suspicious that we are planning something, Sakura pointed out. Kakashi might help with that, Naruto said thoughtfully. He doesn't particularly care for the council, and most of this mess was his idea anyway. Sasuke raised a brow but said nothing. The clans are worried about your mentality, Sakura told Sasuke. You might want to think of ways to prove that you're mostly sane. Mostly? Naruto asked with a grin. I don't think there is a single clan that can claim to be completely sane, Sakura said in disgust. No. Ah, Naruto whined. You don't want to go and rescue little kittens from trees and feed orphans cookies? Go to hell dead last. Bastard. Sakura, sensing where this was going, sighed and shifted her feet out of Naruto's lap. As wonderful as this bonding was, she needed a shower and a long, long night's rest. Sakura sighed and stood, moving to pick up the tray they had piled the okonomiyaki onto, and carried it back into the kitchen. How long are you two planning on sticking around? Why? You ready to get rid of us that early? Naruto teased, his blue eyes smiling at her. I want to take a shower, and the last time you two were together in one place, you ruined my mother's favorite chair, she pointed out. I don't trust you in closed spaces unsupervised. We were 12. I've been told little boys actually never grow up, she shot back, whapping him in the back of the head as she walked by. That was over cookies, he returned, reaching up to rub his head. It isn't like you can actually make good cookies. The cup she threw at him was chakra enhanced. Go away, Naruto, before Sasuke has to take you to the hospital. Let's go, dead last. Sasuke agreed, standing in an easy motion. Shut up, bastard. Rolling her eyes, she headed to her bedroom, shutting the door firmly behind her. If she was lucky, Sasuke would bully Naruto into cleaning. The Uchiha hated to leave messes behind him, and Naruto knew where all her dishes went. If not, then she would just deal with it in the morning. She was tired. Sitting on the bed, she pulled her socks off. She couldn't quite shake the smile that was lingering on her lips. Listening to the faint bickering coming from the living room, she headed into the shower with the knowledge that things were getting better. Naruto whistled faintly as he stepped into Sasuke's apartment. It took forever to get into the place, with all the traps and jutsu Sasuke used to protect his privacy. That went really well. You're pathetic. At least I know what I want, Naruto shot back. You're still floating in limbo. The Uchiha looked away with a scowl. Ino's cute. No. Hinata? Sasuke didn't even bother answering that one. I guess you're right. The whole eye thing. Dead last, his tone was dangerous. Bastard. At least I won't be going back to sleep on her couch like a fool. It was Naruto's turn to face forward. She won't mind. She doesn't know. It's not important right now. Coward. Naruto shrugged, uncaring. He knew Sasuke was just irritated at the way they had cornered them, and had shown him a reason to involve himself in life again. He would just take it out on him tomorrow when they went to spar. Right now, he was too happy about the success of their surprise dinner to really care what his friend thought. Sleeping on her couch let him stay close to her, and Sakura wouldn't mind even if she didn't know. At least, he was pretty sure she wouldn't mind. She hadn't complained yet. Yawning, he rolled his shoulders. So are you in? Sasuke cut him a look, but didn't respond. That didn't bother him either. He knew his friend needed time to think. Naruto was confident that he would help them. There had always been bad blood between the Uchiha clan and the council, and the fox remembered rumors that the boy didn't. Whispered rumors of missions and traps. He didn't know if there was any truth to those rumors, but he wouldn't put it past the Hyuga clan to take advantage of a willing child in the hopes of weakening the Uchiha clan. Still, he doubted even they would have expected Itachi to snap the way he had. Neji would be able to find out, and if not Neji, then Hinata. The Hyuga clan kept careful records of everything they did in their private library. If there had been a plot to date the Uchiha clan, they would have recorded it and then hidden it deep. He would have to get Ino to speak to them about it in private. It was too risky if he conversed with either one of them right then. Ino and Hinata were friends, however, and were not suspicious. You're sure of your allies? Yes. How many? Sakura will get you a list. I'll speak to her. All right. The Kunil will try to stop you. They can't plot for what they don't know, Naruto pointed out. They suspect nothing. You're naive. Perhaps. If things go wrong? Naruto paused, his eyes dancing. You remember Gaara? I heard of the alliance. Let's just say there is a standing agreement between me and the Kazekage. If something goes wrong, Sand will protect us. They risk the alliance. Leaf will have to prove they are hiding us, which I doubt they will be able to do, Naruto said with a smug grin. You'd be surprised how loyal the common folk are to their new Kazekage, and Gaara, unlike the rest of us, has no compulsion against killing his council. They know it. Sasuke snorted, and planted a hand in his friend's back and shoved him out the door. I love you too, you cold fish, Naruto called before turning and headed back to Sakura's. Maybe he could meet her halfway to the hospital and make sure she had eaten in the morning. Onigiri would probably be the best bet he had to get something in her stomach. Looking up to the dark mountain that held the images of the Hokages, he lifted his fingers in a salute. It wouldn't be long before he, Naruto Uzumaki, would be there as well. Then things would change. Sakura tossed a little, unable to sleep. Her dreams had been restless. They weren't exactly nightmares, just uncomfortable blurs of images she knew she recognized but she couldn't quite recall from where. Sitting up, she rubbed her tired eyes. She wanted to blame her restlessness on the conversation she had with Sasuke and Naruto that night, but she couldn't. Difficult sleeping was always a sign of her stress levels, and while the conversation tonight hadn't helped, she could really only blame herself. Ino was right, she had to learn to tell Tsunade no. Well, there was no help for it. The only way she was going to go back to sleep was with a hot glass of herbal tea. Not bothering to turn on the lights, she moved from her bedroom into her living room. She paused halfway through the space, her eyes staring at the figure sprawled comfortably across her couch. He was shirtless and lying on his stomach so she couldn't see his face. He must have showered before coming back to her place, because his hair looked like it had been wet when he went to sleep. What was he doing here? She always kept half an ear open for him when he had been on missions. She had never asked why he felt the need to come to her home when he returned, and he had never volunteered the information. She just hadn't been aware he was using her couch for more than just the occasional stay. Was something wrong? She debated waking him, but decided against it. Her movements in the kitchen would wake him, but at least then she would have a cup of tea to fortify her against whatever conversation he pulled her into instead of her just waking him. Moving around the couch, she pulled out her teapot, setting it on the stove, and started hunting for the packets of herbal tea she kept for this very reason. Surely, she hadn't used them all? Scowling in frustration, she continued to dig deeper into her pantry. The sudden flickering of light almost blinded her. The light would help, Sakura-chan. Slowly peeking through the fingers she had slapped over her eyes, she narrowed green eyes at him when she realized she wasn't blind. Scowling at him, she merely grunted before returning to her search. What are you looking for? His chest was warm as it pressed against her back and she crossed her arms, letting some of her weight fall against him. Tea packets, I didn't think I had used them all. She was forced to slide forward a little to accommodate him as he peered over her shoulder. He didn't seem surprised to find her moving through her kitchen, and she cursed herself for not remembering he was Anbu. He had probably been awake for as long as she had been, and if not, the moment she stepped into the living room he would have been aware of her. She should have just turned on the lights and blinded him, saving herself the trouble. An arm moved into her peripheral vision, and one of her beloved packets was dangling between the fingers in front of her face. This? Yes. Taking the packet and ducking under his arm, she set it on the counter and pulled the mug down. Hesitating, she turned and bit her lip. If there is another one, you're welcome to it. A flash of teeth and he was turning back to the cabinet and searching again. Sakura found herself staring at the thick muscles of his shoulders and back, the way his skin shifted with each movement, and she couldn't look away. The sound of the teapot shrilly echoing through the apartment finally gave her enough willpower to turn away from him. She mentally berated herself. It was Naruto. How are things going with Sasuke? Sakura asked as she accepted the second packet and easily set about making the tea. Fine. Bastard is still slow. She snorted before handing him a mug and moving into the living room to sit on the couch. Flipping out the lights, she let herself adjust before making her way to the couch. Naruto sprawled next to her, warm skin and soft breathing in the darkness. Bad dreams? His tone was cautious and she shook her head, then remembered he couldn't see it. No. I'm just restless, I guess. They couldn't be bad dreams if you didn't remember them. You're working yourself too hard. She ignored his statement, enjoying the heat of the faintly bitter liquid. He was silent as well, and she was struck by how much he had changed. Naruto of 2 years ago would have been slurping his tea. She knew he was drinking the brew. The shifting of his arm against her body was very noticeable, but the movements were completely silent. Anbu had been good for him. Sakura? Are you sure you're okay? His voice was soft and slightly coaxing, and she knew if she could see more the outline of his features, she would see his blue eyes wide with concern. She always wondered how his eyes didn't glow faintly in the dark. They were so bright during the day. Sighing a little, she put her mug down on the table in front of her. It's just mostly stress, Naruto. He had been around her enough in the past to know how hard it was for her to sleep when she was under extreme pressure. Tomorrow is the last day of training for the genin, and things will settle down after that. I just fell behind right now with paperwork and treatments of other patients, and there just don't seem to be enough hours in the day. An arm slid around her shoulder, and she found herself half sprawled against Naruto, his hand resting comfortably on her hip. Smooth skin and hard muscles moved under her palm as she caught her balance by placing one hand firmly on his stomach, the other grasping his shoulder. His very nice stomach and shoulder, the thought flitted through her brain. She swallowed, trying to ignore exactly how warm and comfortable he was beneath her. The memory of Naruto fresh from the shower, damp and barefoot, collided hard against the feel of him now, warm and male. What are you thinking? She berated herself. It's Naruto. Yet, the argument wasn't nearly as convincing as it had been in the past. You know you can come and talk to me when you need, right, Sakura? His voice was surprisingly serious. If something is bothering you, you shouldn't hold it in. Finding her bearings, she snorted. Pot calling the kettle black. He chuckled, his body vibrating. It's different for me. I just beat stuff up. Sometimes you need to talk about it. So I want you to know you can come and talk to me about anything, okay? When had Naruto grown up? I'll remember, she promised. Good, she could almost hear the smile in his voice. Now, I can't actually do anything about the stress of your job, but I can help in other ways. Huh? The next few seconds were very confusing as she found herself sitting on the floor between Naruto's knees, his strong fingers digging into the stiff muscles of her neck and shoulders. Eyes closing in bliss, she groaned as his knuckles bit into a particularly tense muscle. She had forgotten how good he was at this. Damn, Sakura, he grunted. You feel like a brick. Head lolling forward, she made a noise of agreement. It was too much effort to talk when he was doing those lovely things with his fingers. She wasn't sure when she started to doze, but the sudden motion of being lifted startled her awake. Naruto? Yeah? I can walk. You can work on that skill tomorrow, he suggested, flicking the covers back with one hand, holding her easily with the other before setting her down. Smiling at her, his face catching the moonlight, his blue eyes danced. Good night, Sakura-chan. She watched him leave with sleepy eyes, wondering why she was fighting a prick of disappointment. Sasuke was ignoring her. She didn't take it personally, he was ignoring everyone. The only reason she had even known he was there was because she had overheard a pair of old crones talking about the Uchiha clearing out a garden. As far as Sakura knew, the place he was renting didn't have a garden, and he for sure didn't have a green thumb. The time and effort it would take to make a garden was beyond most ninja, and Sasuke had never had the time or the inclination to try. So that meant he had finally been given a mission, which should have technically started the 1-year sentence. She had been curious to find what poor person had paid for genin level and gotten her stony teammate. You didn't mention you were going to start missions today. Her tone was accusing, and he looked up. He didn't seem surprised to see her there, and she frowned down at him. Sasuke tossed a handful of weeds into the wheelbarrow behind him. You haven't been around. Sakura rolled her eyes. With Sasuke, that could mean anything from you haven't been in the village to I haven't looked for you recently to you're too bothersome to find. Thankful that she had worn something comfortable on her day off, she peeled off her sandals, rolled up her pants legs, and hopped the hedge. Those dark eyes narrowed, spearing her into place. What are you doing? Pulling weeds? Why? She shot him an amused grin. This way I can spend time with you, Sasuke-kun, and you won't run away. She had to duck behind her hair to hide her silent laughter at the disgruntled look on his face. Odds were he would get revenge for that one, but it had been too easy. They worked in silence for several moments, only the occasional grunt as a particularly stubborn weed was pulled from the ground. Somehow it seemed to be cheating to use chakra to do something as simple. Sasuke was probably limited with how much he could use, so it was only fair that she follow the same rules. For now. Have you seen Naruto? No. She shot him a look that he seemed to ignore. Have you been out here long? He gave her a cool look and she admitted to herself that had been a bit of a stupid question. It would take Sasuke a bit longer by himself to clean out the weeds, but not all morning. He had barely cleared anything, so it was reasonable to assume he hadn't been working for more than half an hour. Still, he didn't have to be such a jerk about it. Can you answer any of my questions with more than one word? Yes. She tossed a handful of weeds at him, and he brushed them off his shirt with a faintly narrowed gaze. Sticking her tongue out, she went back to work, watching him out of the corner of her eye. It was painfully easy to fall into a rhythm with him. He moved so differently from Naruto, and he wasn't quite the extension of herself that Naruto had become on missions, but he was familiar. Now that she was looking for ways to integrate herself with him as a teammate, and only a teammate, it was easy. It was those moments before Orochimaru stole him from them at the Chunin exams where they had been a team. That moment when he had defended her with all his rage. The workload at the hospital has finally settled down, Sakura told him as she worked. That means I'm back to my on-1, off-2 shift. Will you let me know when you and Naruto plan on sparring? She didn't have to tell him how much she missed working with them. Even she heard it in her voice. Tsunade requires a meeting in the morning, Sasuke said after several moments. I play genin in the day. Before or after dinner? Before we eat late. She smiled. That's fine. I don't usually have time to eat until after shift anyway. Fighting at night was dangerous for a variety of reasons, but she could understand why her teammates practiced then. Her stomach churned with excitement, even as her mind groaned with the beating she was going to take until she grew accustomed to not seeing her sparring partners again. Sakura-chan, bastard? What are you doing? But without me, was clear in his voice. Sakura pointed at Sasuke. It was time he took the blame for something mundane in the team, after all. He has a D-class mission and didn't say anything. To Sakura's eternal delight, Naruto apparently didn't know either. He frowned at his friend, hands on his hips. Shaking his head, he bent down to remove his sandals. Sasuke's looked torn between rolling his eyes and just scowling. You said you would tell me what your first mission was, Naruto scolded, jumping over the hedge easily. Sasuke gave him a look. Pulling weeds? Naruto pointed at him. It's still a mission. Kakashi never let us pick weeds. Sakura snorted. He never let you two pull weeds. I had to pull them at least once a week. Both men gave her blank looks. When? While you two were chasing lost kittens, Sakura returned with a shrug, reaching down to pull up another handful. Or something else that was equally ridiculous. Hey! Chasing kittens is not ridiculous! Naruto exclaimed, one fist filled with weeds waved in the air so that dirt dropped onto his shirt. There were no kittens, Sakura returned with an eye roll, moving several feet away from them to start on a new patch of weeds. You were just so bad at D-class missions, Kakashi didn't want to risk the ones that required you to know the difference between weeds and flowers. You would have been suspicious if Sasuke wasn't sent to find kittens, so he figured the two of you could occupy yourselves. She peeked glance at them from behind her bangs and bit down on her giggles. Naruto's mouth was open and his eyes were wide, and Sasuke was staring at her with a very disgruntled expression. But weeds, Naruto, Sakura scolded, if we want to be out of here in time to enjoy lunch before Sasuke has to report again. Somehow, they managed to not only remove the weeds, Naruto had been designated to pushing the wheelbarrow. He still sucked at D-class missions, turned the dirt, Sasuke, and managed to fertilize the remaining plants, Sakura, so that the place looked respectable. Using the water hose to wash her hands, she shook her head at the two men leaning against the wall. Any thoughts on lunch? Ramen. Sasuke grunted in what was clearly a negative as she turned the faucet off, shaking her hands dry. Ignoring Naruto's pleas for ramen was second nature to her. She wondered how long it would be before Sasuke just learned to ignore his suggestions about food. The onigiri stand won't open again for another hour, Sakura said with a sigh, brushing her pink hair out of her face. She squeaked when Naruto grabbed her wrist, dragging her along. Sasuke was firmly anchored by the other hand. We're not arguing all afternoon. We'll just head over to Ichiraku's. I can have ramen, and he has been experimenting with his menu lately. He shot a disapproving look over his shoulder. I bet you two never go there unless I drag you. And suffer your wrath because we went without you. Sakura growled, twisting her wrist in an attempt to get him to let go. Sakura. Naruto stopped so fast she bounced off him and straight into Sasuke. Growling in warning, she twisted around and swatted Naruto in the head. Her name was repeated, louder this time, and she looked up in time to see Rock Lee skid to a stop in front of her. I have come to invite you to lunch. Sakura blinked at him and smiled. Before she could speak up, Sasuke had beaten her to the punch. We are going to Ichiraku's. There was an almost disapproving note in his tone that everyone else just ignored. Lee's expression brightened. Today is the day for ramen. I must join you. We can share the beauty of ramen and Sakura together. Naruto clapped Lee on the back. Of course you are welcome to join us. Comrade. Sakura shook her head as she watched the two most hyperactive ninja in the village walk in front of them. Lee was telling Naruto about a mission. She really wasn't paying much attention, and she looked up at Sasuke. Naruto was right when he said the menu had changed. Ichiraku has some donburi dishes for those of us who really don't care for ramen and somehow get dragged in by Naruto every week. Sasuke grunted. Half an hour later had them settled into a table eating lunch. Sakura and Sasuke had decided on the beef bowl of donburi, while Lee and Naruto were engaging in a friendly competition on who could eat the most ramen. Sakura didn't even bother to keep tabs on who was ahead. Naruto was a bottomless stomach that was made even deeper by ramen. Poor Lee was going to be running laps all afternoon. For once, Sakura didn't feel that the lack of conversation between her and Sasuke was stifled. Smiling to herself, she looked up, fine Naruto watching her with a knowing smile before he went back to his ramen. Sakura grunted as she helped Naruto carry the couch up the stairs. She wondered why Sasuke had chosen a building with such narrow, little stairs. Scowling when her hip crashed into the wall, she shot the Uchiha, who had sat the coffee table down to unlock his door, a glare. She knew he could feel her ire, but he wasn't calling her on it. Stupid man. Maybe she should just throw the couch at his head. Sorry about that, Sakura. Naruto's voice was sheepish. You can walk and carry something at the same time, can't you? Sakura snapped irritably, hefting the couch to follow him into the slightly larger apartment that Sasuke had finally moved into. The past 3 months of genin work hadn't paid much, hardly anything, but the council had finally given him access to the Uchiha accounts. She wondered if she was the only one to suspect Tsunade bullying everyone into her way of thinking. Either way, it had taken Sasuke 2 weeks to find a place acceptable and at a rent price he considered decent. The man was such a penny pincher. The blonde gave her a hard look, which she ignored in favor of accidentally trying to smash his foot with the couch when she dropped her end. Naruto swore and dodged, bumping into the wall, and she moved around the couch to examine the place. Sasuke had apparently already moved most of his boxes into the apartment. All that was left was the furniture and a few breakables. She hoped he had ridden fragile, That means no, Naruto in large, large letters. The place was surprisingly spacious. The two-bedroom apartment was a little dark. The windows were small and the bedroom with all the boxes was windowless. Still, she supposed she could drop a few hints that lamps or candles were appreciated as housewarming gifts. Maybe Kakashi would even splurge for something other than a cheap plant. Man, team, you need some windows. Sasuke snorted. It's fine. There isn't any light. Some of us don't need it. Vampire. Sakura rolled her eyes. I'm heading down to start bring up the rest of the pots and pans. You two get the futon. Do not touch anything that says fragile, Naruto. Sasuke's doubtful voice followed her. You know what the word means, right? Of course. Sakura explained it perfectly last time. Eventually they brought the rest of his stuff up to the apartment. Naruto had rummaged through some boxes and plugged in a few of the lamps to give them more light once it started to get darker, muttering under his breath about vampires and snakes. Sasuke dropped a box of scrolls on his foot. She rolled her eyes. I feel like I'm in the middle of a circus. Naruto looked doubtful. I'm not sure Sasuke would fit in. Sasuke shot him a look. What does that mean? You don't have a personality, Naruto said matter-of-factly. Sasuke paused from where he was organizing his bookshelf. What? You're about as huggable as a water snake, Naruto continued. You're both idiots, Sakura snipped from where she was organizing the dishes. Hey, Sakura-chan, is something bothering you? Sakura sighed, rubbing the bridge of her nose. No, nothing, never mind. Sasuke, how do you want these plates organized? Where they fit. Her brow twitched, but she managed to keep from flinging the plate at his head. This time she caught the exchange of looks between the men and applied a little more pressure to her nose before setting out to organize the dishes. Hey, Sakura, you sure nothing is bothering you? Naruto's voice had lost its hesitation. She sighed. Have I really been that snappy? Some, Sasuke agreed. She rubbed her face in earnest. Sorry. I'm just a little tired. You're still not sleeping well? You're not allowed to hijack my couch, Naruto. Don't change the subject, Sasuke suggested as he moved a box. She scowled at him. I was just out late, that's all. With who? Naruto's voice was surprisingly lacking emotion. She grumbled. Some Anbu Ino thought would be a good lay. A box tumbled to the ground with a loud crashing noise. Spinning around, she stared at Naruto, who was rubbing the back of his head sheepishly, avoiding Sasuke's furious glare. Sorry. Sasuke frowned at him a little longer before turning to stare at Sakura. How did it go? Horribly, she growled, moving back to the dishes. Ino has some really stupid theory about going after someone in ANBU because they can keep up. She really didn't want to mention sex to either of her teammates. She didn't want to think sex with either of her teammates in the same building. So she keeps trying to pair me up with them. Which ones? Naruto asked. There was too much innocence in that tone. I don't remember all their names. It was a lie. She knew all their names perfectly so she could throw them into Ino's face later as to why she didn't date ANBU, but telling that to either of her teammates was bad. She wasn't stupid enough to give Naruto anything on someone he thought was the cause of any pain for her, and Sasuke, she wasn't sure how Sasuke would react. At the very least, he would tell Naruto whatever she told him. What did they do? Nothing that I couldn't handle, Sakura said without looking at them. I think part of it is probably Ino's fault. I have no idea what she told them. But I will. When she got her hands on Ino's round neck, she was just going to start squeezing. Naruto made a noise and then there was a curious thumping sound, but by the time she had turned around, Sasuke and Naruto weren't even looking at each other. She hated it when they did that. Anyway, I'm sorry I was taking it out on you. She shrugging, shoving her fingers into her bangs in the hopes that she would be able to see. They needed to be trimmed. Right, Naruto said with his familiar smile. Turning back to Sasuke, he sighed. Did you have to have so many boxes? Shut up, doe. Bastard. One of you should start thinking about dinner, Sakura suggested as she opened another box. I don't have the pots and pans unloaded yet, and Sasuke doesn't have any groceries. We are going to need food. I'll get it, Naruto volunteered. The onigiri stand should be open by now. I can go pick some up to hold us over until we finish unpacking and then we can just go out to eat. Sakura's mouth watered. That sounds good. Fish. I know. I know, Naruto said with an eye roll. All you ever eat is fish. HN. You want fruit or fish, Sakura-chan? She hesitated and then smiled. Both, please. He nodded. All right, I'll be back in a few then. Sakura sighed once the door shut. I would accuse him of just trying to get out of work, but I'm too hungry to care. Sasuke shrugged. At least he will be quick about it. Sakura nodded in agreement. Naruto loved food, and was always quick to make sure his teammates had their own meals as quickly as possible. She had written it off as a quirk to his living on the streets as a child, but sometimes she wasn't so sure. The last few months had been normal. Her, Naruto, and Sasuke hanging out between missions and work, apartment hunting for Sasuke, and the occasional dinner out. There hadn't been any of those strangely warm looks from her friend. Even stranger was she hadn't felt that all-encompassing relief she had expected. Shaking off those thoughts, she buckled in and set about working her way through the rest of the kitchen. Sakura reached around Sasuke and nabbed another onigiri. The table that Sasuke had hauled up into the apartment was his coffee table, so they were all sprawled out on the floor. It wasn't the most comfortable arrangement. Sasuke didn't have her foresight for pillows, but stuffing their faces with the food made up for it. Naruto had brought home several varieties of fish, tuna for her, and fruit, including the sour umebashi onigiri for them to eat. So why the 2 bedrooms? Sakura asked before she bit into the rice ball. Sasuke sighed. They didn't have 3 rooms that were acceptable. Sakura stopped chewing and gave Naruto a confused look. He hurriedly swallowed. Hey, I hadn't thought of that. Why are there 2 rooms? Sasuke didn't answer, simply picked up the now empty containers, leaving the one that still held a half-dozen onigiri, and disappeared into the kitchen. Sakura frowned and looked at Naruto. He still looked a little confused, but there was a growing look of comprehension on his face. For us, he said softly. Sakura tilted her head. Huh? How often were you in his other place, Sakura? I mean, did you see those dorms they made him live in with the genin? She shook her head. She hadn't actually been in his other place. They always met at Naruto's when they sparred, sometimes crashing on the floor of Naruto's apartment depending on how tired they were and how much healing was required for the evening. Oh, she muttered, eyes widening on comprehension. Naruto nodded, falling onto his back so that his shoulder rested against her thigh. The bastard is going to have to let us know about his traps. The sound of Sasuke snorting in the kitchen had her grinning. At least the ones that aren't in your bedroom, she called out, reaching over to rub strands of Naruto's hair between her fingers as she thought. He grinned at her and wiggled his head closer, and she rolled her eyes, but tangled her fingers a little further into his hair and lightly rubbed his scalp. Sasuke wanted to give them a bolt hole. Not that he would say this was what it was, but Naruto had commented, once or twice, how heavily he had guarded his privacy in his last apartment. Compared to that, Naruto's flimsy traps had to be hard on his nerves, especially the nights that all 3 of them spent sprawled out in various places, too tired from healing/training to move. Tsunade had told her, in those blurred days when they had first brought Sasuke back, that things would be different. He had changed in ways they couldn't fathom. She wondered if having this place of safety for all 3 of them was one of those changes, or if he was really always this paranoid. It was so hard to tell what was Itachi's fault, what was Orochimaru's, and what was just Sasuke. It was plausible to think that before his clan was killed that he hoarded things and kept them safe, but this need to keep his team safe and in his sight when they had moments of weakness had developed when she wasn't looking. Not that she was really going to complain, she had already looked at his hot water heater, and it was twice the size of hers. Well, Sakura said as she picked herself up. We should get back to work. We still have a few hours of unpacking work to do. She nodded towards the bedroom. Unless you want Naruto in there, Sasuke, you might consider heading in there to work while we finish the kitchen and the living room. He nodded and disappeared. Sakura collapsed into the ground next to Sasuke. It was a rare afternoon spare and Naruto was off on some Anbu business. Sparring with both of them was a painful joy. Sparring with just Sasuke gave her a chance to hone skills she would never think to use against Naruto. She tried not to smirk as she remembered how quickly Sasuke was to move away from her fists. At least he was breathing hard, sweat sliding down his temples. She was completely soaked in a gross, manly sort of way. Sighing, she tossed one leg over her knee and stared at her foot. You were distracted today. HN. Normally without Naruto here to keep you entertained, my ribs would feel like they were created out of pudding instead of actual bone. She didn't look over at him, but she imagined that once in a past life, he might have rolled his eyes. However, when she neglected to even get a grunt from him, she twisted out onto her stomach and stared at him. You are distracted. He opened his eyes and stared at her. The red pinwheels were still circling in his eyes, and she blinked as he scanned the area around them. Hey, I'm no Naruto, but I like to think my talents of conversation have at least improved past his over the years. I might not listen exactly as well as he does, but my ears do work, Sasuke. He sighed and flopped onto his back. She felt a smile tug at her mouth. If he was relaxing, that meant they had moved far enough into the training ground that they were alone. For now, at least. Well, when dealing with Sasuke, it was always advisable to cheat like Shikamaru. Besides, we're teammates. If you can't talk to me about your problems, who can you? Naruto doesn't count. The council. A world of explanation in 2 words. Propping her head up on her knuckles, she considered him. There were only so many things that council actually had on Sasuke that could bother him, and the sharpest weapon in that arsenal was the status of clan. Hissing low between her teeth, she sat up. Sasuke would know before she did if someone was trying to listen, the paranoid bastard. It was safe to talk. So what's the problem, Sasuke? Are they giving you a deadline for starting the clan before they disband you or something? He stood in a single, smooth motion that she could appreciate from a perspective that was that of a teammate, and a bit of a woman who liked men with good backs. The greatest part of learning that her emotions were no longer so deeply tied up with Sasuke was being able to appreciate his form honestly. However, now was not the time. Sasuke! Shoving to her feet, she chased him. Wait a minute, alright? To her delight, he stopped. It startled her enough that she almost tripped before she managed to catch herself. He didn't turn towards her, but the fact that he had stopped was clearly a sign that they were friends. Finally. I can't help if I don't know the problem. His shoulders were so tight she could see the knots of muscles under his shirt. When he spoke, his voice was flat. The council is worried about my lack of an heir. You're only 20. A jerky, hard shrug. So they want you to produce an heir. This was a bit like talking to a Naruto who didn't want to admit something. You just kept guessing until you hit it on the nail. She had gotten very good at guessing. They want an heir by the time I am 26 to secure the line of my clan. Sakura frowned. 26 was a long time for a ninja. She supposed that it allowed the council to pat themselves on the back and say how generous they were being. Biting her lip, she chewed on that thought. They were giving themselves a failsafe. Did that mean they didn't expect Sasuke to live to 26, or were they hoping he would give them a reason to disband the clan altogether before then? How long had it taken Sasuke to trust them to watch his back? Trust them to stay alive long enough for him to get there? How much longer would it take for him to find a woman he would let in his apartment, much less into his bed, who could defend his children from those who wished the Uchiha clan stayed dead? What could she do about that? Does Naruto know? HN. Rolling her eyes, she shoved her hands into her pockets and moved to stand next to his shoulders. Staring at the trees, she formulated what exactly she wanted to say. What do you think the odds are of Naruto being Hokage in 6 years? She felt the weight of his stare on her face, and she tilted her head to look at him. Why did all the men in her life have to be taller than her? 6 years, Sasuke? That's our deadline to getting Naruto secured as Hokage. What do you think the odds are? He will need the support of 3/5 of the council. There was a silent question behind his words. Who supports him now? I'll come by tonight. She kept the list of clans quietly supporting Naruto in her head. She didn't dare write them down. Sakura. She turned to face him fully, her brow lifted in question. Do you think he can do it? She was quiet for a moment before answering. He brought you back. No matter how many times we were told it would never happen, Naruto never stumbled. He never let me stumble either. I don't think there is anything he can't accomplish. He makes friends where there isn't any, and he has the uncanny ability to win exactly the right people he needs to his side. She paused, attempting to put her thoughts together. I will never, ever doubt him because he has never doubted me. Even so, this isn't a battlefield, and while clan alliances and politics don't mean much to him, they are going to mean everything until he is Hokage. Then things would change. Sasuke finally nodded. 8 o'clock. She opened her mouth to say something else, but he had changed his stance. It was a warning he wouldn't have given Naruto. Groaning mentally, she formed chakra along her hands and waited to see what he would do. It was going to hurt later. A whole lot, if the way his mouth had curled a little at the edges said anything. But it was worth it. Sakura rubbed her tired eyes as she moved to sit down in front of Tsunade's desk. Even without Orochimaru leading sound, they were still causing trouble. Unfortunately, A genin team and their jounin had run into a squad. Only one of the genin had made it back, and even after hours of surgery, he hadn't made it. Rubbing palms that even after several washings felt sticky with blood, she watched as the Hokage read her report. The one sitting next to it had to be what was written up from the child's statement. She had been too involved in keeping his heart and lungs working while he gasped out what had happened to actually pay attention to what he was saying. She wasn't even sure who it had been. Anbu have been hunting the remains of the Sound Ninja for months now. We have had some success. The words hung between them, and Sakura suddenly knew who had had the most success and why he had pushed himself so hard. However, we obviously haven't gotten them all. I have already assigned an ANBU squad to see what they could find. Sakura frowned. Why was Tsunade telling her this? I have clearance from the council, the edge of her mouth curled a little, to allow the Uchiha to be assigned to tracking and destroying what is left of the Sound. Her heart dropped into her stomach. There had to be things Tsunade wasn't telling her if she was actually allowing Sasuke to leave Konoha, and if she was telling the truth, if the council had agreed to such a move. Lacing her fingers together tightly, she struggled for her composure. I would just send out Kakashi and perhaps the Neji, but both are currently occupied. Kakashi was hunting the Akatsuki with several Sand operatives and had been for months. Neji couldn't leave Konoha because of the current split in the Hyuga clan. It would severely weaken Hinata's position to lose Neji's support if something happened. It was all a balancing act. Sakura would have given her arm to know what exactly Tsunade had done to get compliance from the council regarding Sasuke. Why? Sakura started, but Tsunade held up her hand. Naruto, and you will be accompanying him when he leaves in the morning. The council wants someone who is strong enough to bring him back if he tries to bolt, and no matter how much trust one put into Naruto, the council does not see things the way I do. However, you are my apprentice. They will accept you as a part of this mission to give an accurate and correct report once you return. Sakura licked dry lips. Even with Sasuke's in my past? My friendship with Naruto? You are a ninja. You will do your duty, Tsunade said in a hard voice. She reached up and rubbed the bridge of her nose. I considered suggesting someone else, but the three of you still work well together. Throwing in an unfamiliar ninja with Sasuke right now would end up getting someone killed. Sakura nodded. She knew Tsunade was aware that they had been training together at night, and she also knew Tsunade was aware of how much time she had been spending outside of work with her teammates. Tsunade reached down and picked up a scroll. Here is the mission scroll. I expect you and your team to leave at dawn tomorrow. Sakura took the scroll and bowed, hoping that it wasn't noticeable how tightly she had twisted her fingers together behind her back. Her insides were a mess of excitement, Team 7, and anticipation, Sound. She wasn't entirely sure where things would be once they settled out. By the time she managed to get her thoughts in order, she found herself staring at Naruto's front door. Blinking in surprise, she hadn't remembered walking this far. She bit her bottom lip before rapping on the door and bouncing on her heels as she waited for him to answer. She supposed she could have just walked in, she had the key, but the last time that happened, she had caught him in just a towel. Shivering a little at the memory, wet skin, hard muscles, she forced the thoughts of her mind as the door opened. Sakura-chan. I didn't think we were meeting to train for another hour. She cleared her throat. I have a mission tomorrow. He moved aside to let her in the door. Really? I thought Tsunade was keeping you close to the hospital for more training. I'm going as part of a team, Naruto. That's why we have medic Nin, you know. True. He agreed, flopping next to her when she sat on the couch. Can you talk about it? She handed him the scroll. He gave her a confused look before shrugging and unrolling it. She looked away from him, lacing her fingers together and just listening to the sound of his breathing. The moment the assignment sank and he stopped moving. Is this right? Straight from Tsunade. She didn't have to look to see the grin that was splitting Naruto's face. She could feel it. Allowing the corners of her own mouth to lift a little, she tilted her head to look at him. I thought we could go tell him, together. I mean, I have to head home afterwards to pack. It could take us a while, but I thought. Her nose was buried in his shoulder, and that made it hard to talk. His chin rested on the top of her head as he hugged her, arms squeezing as they savored the realization that they were back together. Years of work had finally paid off. Not exactly in the way that they had wanted, but with her medic Nin training, and once Sasuke was allowed to train for ENBU, their teamwork would be valuable enough they would get missions together. Horrible missions that would wring them out from the inside, but at least they would be wrung out together instead of alone. Wrapping her arms around Naruto's waist, she savored the knowledge that they had won at least one battle against the council. Sakura pulled the last of her dirty clothing out of her pack and made a face at the smell. Blood. She supposed she should be used to the smell of it after missions, in the hospital, and the way it faintly permeated where she stored her pack between missions. Shaking out the shirt, she studied the stain in the fabric. Wrinkling her nose, she wiggled a finger through the slice in the material. At least kunai left behind holes that were easier to mend than, say, tree branches. Tree branches always left behind ragged tears that took some creativity to disguise. She was pretty sure this was going to be salvageable. It wasn't like the sound Neen paid particular attention to what she was wearing, after all. A vicious little smile curved her mouth. No, indeed, they were too busy watching what happened to the object she hid if she missed them. Still, she would be ashamed of herself if she didn't do a good enough job mending that Sasuke wouldn't notice. Not something a lot of would-be ninja thought about. How good they have to be at mending their own uniforms. She was quite certain the prospect would have paused even Naruto. Even if he managed to talk her into doing most of the sewing for him, Sasuke at least had the decency to mend his own clothes. Granted, that could have been from his refusal to admit any sort of weakness. If a ninja had to learn how to sew, then he was going to be good at it. Studying the fabric in her hands, she chewed on her bottom lip. The mission had been difficult. They still hadn't worked out a perfect system. There were moments when they flowed with each other, extensions of the other, until she knew that if she ducked just so, Naruto's fist would embed itself into the jaw of the sound Nin who attempted to stab her, or that if she rolled forward into the punch, the heat of Sasuke's jutsu would barely singe her. Then there were times they were so disjointed it made her teeth hurt. Naruto was still too rash, Sasuke too controlling. It was a lot easier to settle fights when you could hit a tree hard enough to splinter it into 1,000 toothpicks, but those silences never lasted long. It was wonderful. It was exhausting. It was everything it hadn't been as a child in the Chunin exams. It was getting better. Naruto was willing to give now, until Sasuke understood that things didn't always have to be this way. She was willing to sleep close enough that she could smell the sweat and blood on their skin, if only they would shut up. They pretended she wasn't overly sensitive, and she pretended that they weren't reverting to teenagers when she wasn't paying attention. There was no Kakashi to watch them as they slept, and there was a freedom in those woods. A freedom in being Team 7 without having Anbu watching their every move, without struggling to keep her own exhaustion and fear tucked away. Around the campfire, there was only there now, and the what-ifs only crowded in a little. She was pulled out of her musings at the sound of knuckles rapping against her door. Dropping the tunic, she headed to see who was dropping by. Sasuke had said something about digging through his family scrolls, and Naruto was off dealing with some ANBU reports he had apparently fudged the first time that left only a few people that she could think of offhand who would visit. Certainly it wasn't Kakashi. Ten. The other woman smiled and held up a small satchel. I thought you had forgotten. Sakura stared at her for a moment before blushing. Well, yes, I did. Tenten's eyes crinkled at the edges, as if she had spent a lot of time laughing. With Guy and Lee on her team, that could have been from self-preservation. Moving to the right, Sakura motioned for her to step in. I finished them last week, but you were out hunting sound. Tenten nodded towards the bloody clothing on the floor. Seems like the rumor was right. There was a faintly wistful note in her voice, and Sakura could only nod. Team Guy had been grounded months ago. Even though Niji was ANBU, Tenten and Lee were still his preferred partners when he was hunting. Sakura knew that there were missions that had taken the Hyuga out of the village alone, but it had been some time since she had heard rumors that even one of the members of Team Guy had left the village on a mission. Sakura wondered how much of that was Tsunade giving Niji backup, and how much was Team Guy refusing to leave the back of their white-eyed partner defenseless, no matter how much he could see. Yes, Sakura said with a smile as she retrieved the clothing and tossed it into the washer to be dealt with later. Maybe some salt would help with the worst of it. So how many did you get finished? All 24, Tenten assured her as she sat the bundle on the table and unfolded the neat roll of canvas to show off the gleaming kunai. Sakura whistled in appreciation. It had been by accident that she had discovered the weapon master's knack with metal. She had been assigned to emergency duty a few years ago and had dug a kunai out of Lee's back. As a ninja, she had made a point to get to know all the weaponsmiths in the village, but the kunai she had pulled from Lee hadn't bared any of the marks she was familiar with. It had taken some wheedling, but she had finally gotten it out of Lee, and had been quietly ordering kunai from Tenten since. Thanks. I think Sasuke has been snitching them when I'm not looking. She wrinkled her nose. Naruto just takes them from Sasuke. Tenten smiled again. Should I make more of your surprise? Sakura shook her head. No, those really aren't from missions, you know? Besides, it's nice to know something they don't occasionally. Although I don't think it will take them too long to figure things out once I give them their presents. Tenten smiled. It's easy enough to make 24 as it is too, it's just the polishing and refining the edges that takes the time. She gave another one of her shrugs. Right now I seem to have more time than I know what to do with. How is that going? Oh, it's alright. Guy considers it a challenge to keep us busy, even though we technically don't need a jounin instructor anymore. A faint smile curved along her mouth. It could be worse. Sakura tossed Tenten the bag of coins she had set aside from her mission pay. That should cover what I owe you. I haven't seen Ino in a few weeks, so we should go out sometime this week. Tenten nodded, her smile widening. I would like that. I have to run some errands over on her side of the village, so I'll stop in and see if she is going to have time. Sakura grinned. That would be great. I'll see you later then. Tell Lee I said hi. I will. Take care. Sakura shut the door and smiled to herself. She just hoped the surprise for her boys, tucked safely under a loose board under her bed, would go over well. The kunai Tenten had made at her request weren't exactly the sort that Sasuke or Naruto would take into battle. They were just a little too ornate, but they were sharp and their balance true. Open weapons. The kind they could wear in public as decoration at formal events or keep on a wall as an open, but pretty threat. The sort of thing Sasuke was lacking in his home, and if she was getting Sasuke something, it was just as easy to spend the extra coin and get Naruto a similar gift. Sasuke for something to put on his walls. Naruto as something he could use later, when he was Hokage and at some diplomatic meeting. Turning, she gathered the kunai up, went to put them away. There was still laundry and mending to do, and sitting around thinking of her boys just wasn't going to get it done. The world had disappeared into a rush of white and fire. Even now, hidden behind the safety of her eyelids, she wasn't ready to leave. She could still feel that rush of heat and water. Voice penetrated her foggy mind, familiar, angry voices. Struggling her way to the surface, she tried to decide if the anger was directed at her. For a single moment, she could recognize a voice saying her name over and over, but then it was too difficult to pull completely out of that darkness, and she was sinking again. The next time she woke, everything hurt. Every bone in her body felt like it was burning, and even the ends of her hair smarted. Blinking slowly, she found herself staring at a fire that was warmly crackling against an evening chill. It took a while to expand her awareness from the fire. Shifting a little, she bit back a moan at the sharp pain that movement brought. She must have made some noise, because a moment later she was staring into a pair of dark eyes. Sasuke looked exhausted, a large bruise forming on the side of his face, but he was alive. Swallowing down the relief that brought, she closed her eyes again. Sakura. She opened her eyes again at the tone of his voice. There was an expression in his eyes she couldn't read very deeply into. She tried to say his name in return, but her throat was so dry the words cracked before they were formed. He reached over and lifted her head, that hurt, and settled a canteen against her lips. Exhausted by the move, she panted a little, trying to convince herself that her ribs were not embedding themselves in her lungs. That was very stupid of you. She processed his words, but they didn't bring any images with them. It was hard to get upset when you couldn't remember why you felt like you had been buried under a rock slide and then dragged through a ravine by a raging river. Blowing yourself up as a warning is not acceptable, Sakura. That did bring up memories. She had been on scouting duty, carefully searching the area for the sound ninja they had been trailing. There hadn't been any rumors of Akatsuki members in the area. There had been no reason to expect her to run into trouble that she couldn't handle. Halfway across a small ravine, she had seen him. Kisame Hashigaki. He had worked alone since the death of Itachi, but that didn't mean he hadn't picked up a partner along the way. He was between her and her team, and there was no way to warn them that there might be more Akatsuki in the area. Hard in her throat, she had done the only thing she could think of that would have brought her help and warned them of the danger they were in. She had blown up the wall of the ravine she was standing on top of. The faint memory of thick, rushing water must have been from Kisame's water attacks. She had known that if she survived the explosion, if Naruto and Sasuke survived the fight, that they would find her. She didn't know why Sasuke was so testy. Then suddenly there was another presence next to her. Sighing internally, she lifted her lashes to find herself staring up at a furious Naruto. His eyes were narrowed, and she didn't think it was a trick of the fire that they were faintly red. She had the vague impression that if she wasn't hurting so badly, he would have been shaking her. Even knowing he was so mad at her didn't quell the fact that she was so relieved that he was alive. That they had both survived. What were you thinking? Naruto growled down at her. Sakura closed her eyes. It was easier to deal with these things when she wasn't forced to look at such grim disapproval. Warning you? She whispered. It worked. The sound of cloth being strained to the breaking point had her sighing. You're alive, Naruto. You almost weren't. Sasuke's voice broke into the slowly growing haze. She blinked her eyes open again. If half burying yourself wasn't good enough, Kisame did his best to drown you. Knew you would come, she said simply. Reaching over with her right hand, she managed to find Naruto's clenched fist and settled her fingers over the digits. As she started to drift off again, she felt a hand cover hers. When she woke up for the third time, she smelled Naruto and rich earth. It took a few moments to realize he was carrying her. She was settled across his back as he moved as smoothly as he was able, his body moving in a way that managed to keep her from being jarred too badly. Curling her fingers into his shirt, she let him know she was somewhat awake. He didn't pause between leaps, but he did tighten his grip to silently inform her he wasn't putting her down. Safe with the realization that he wouldn't drop her, she turned her attention to all the internal bruising and mostly heel breaks. She would have to ask them who had healed her, because she knew she hadn't been in a position to heal herself. She lost track of time as she carefully set about healing the worst of what was left of her injuries. She mended the rest of her fractures, eased the pressure on her lungs from her ribs, and had managed to deal with the worst of the bruising before she heard Naruto softly calling her name. Blinking her eyes opening, she shifted to let him know she was aware. "We're stopping for a bit," he told her, lowering her to the ground so that her feet could touch. She slipped off his back, but before her muscles could decide if they could hold her, Sasuke had settled an arm around her waist and held her up until she was steady. "Thank you?" she whispered against his side, moving away once her feet recognized what to do with sturdy ground. Blinking a little, she frowned. "Where are we?" "About a day from Konoha," Naruto said as he stared digging through one of the packs. "We're heading back to report to Tsunade." "Our mission?" "Kakashi had already dealt with the sound ninja when we ran into the Akatsuki. Sasuke supplied us squatted next to her to start putting together a fire." "Kakashi?" She didn't remember seeing Kakashi at all. She blinked in surprise when Naruto took a very deep, steadying breath before turning to face her. "Kakashi was hunting Kisame when you decided to blow up a chunk of the ravine. By the time we arrived, he was already engaged." His jaw worked for a moment before he continued. "Sasuke went after you while I joined the fight." Sakura nodded. Naruto was the best one to deal with Kisame since he had the most chakra. "Kisame?" "Escaped," Sasuke said coolly. "However, I do believe he will be carrying new scars the next time we meet." She just nodded before picking a patch of grass and settling down. Sitting burned a little in her muscles, but it was easier now that her ribs were mended and her chest muscles were no longer so bruised. "Who healed me?" "Kakashi had a sand medic Nin with him." Naruto's voice was hard. That explained why her bones hadn't finished being healed. "He did what he could." "He kept you alive," Sasuke agreed. Sakura sighed. She probably should have tried to think of another way to warn them, but when faced with a monster of a man whose sword ate chakra, when you were facing the very people who knew how to kill demon containers, you had to move quickly. Naruto and Sasuke had been far enough away she hadn't been able to warn them with her voice, and if she had tried, she wasn't sure she would have been able to stay alive long enough for them to find her. She could fight Sound Nin, she could deal with horrendous injuries, and she could even face Orochimaru with determination. She could even deal with Akatsuki members, some just required help. Kisame was one of those. She was going to have to get Tsunade to help her perfect her summoning technique for the next time she was in one of these situations. She really didn't think Naruto and Sasuke would ever forgive her if she blew herself up twice. However, she wasn't going to apologize for doing her duty. If the grim set to Naruto and Sasuke's mouth said anything, they knew it. They also knew that she had acted in the only means necessary to her, and they weren't happy. "Kakashi told us we could look at his library of scrolls while he was gone," Naruto finally said. She looked up in surprise. "For what?" "Genjutsu," Sasuke said. She winced. She had really only seen them this irritated once, at the same time, since they had started taking A-rank missions together. The very first time they had gone after Sound Nin, but that was something she didn't like to rehash. "Genjutsu would be a good idea," Sakura agreed. Naruto was suddenly very, very close. "You aren't going to do that again, Sakura." She blinked at the hard look in those blue eyes and the faintest flick of red around his pupil. She shook her head. "I will do what I have to do to protect you and Sasuke, Naruto." His eyes narrowed and she reached up and covered his mouth with her hand. "However, in most situations, I won't have to. Kisame wasn't some Sound Nin, and his skills ran directly to my weaknesses. Taking him on alone would have been suicide. I did what I had to do to warn you and Sasuke that there was trouble. I didn't know if there were more Akatsuki members with him. They still want the fox, Naruto. It wasn't a situation where I could sit and wait for an opening to warn you, or allow myself to be caught as bait for you to come rescue." His eyes were still narrowed, but he had relaxed. Pulling away, he reached up and caught her wrist. Eyes locked with hers, he deliberately brought her hand back to his mouth, and kissing the center of her palm for several long heartbeats before letting her go. "I'll go catch lunch." Then he was gone. Leaving her with wide eyes, her fingers curled around the sensation of warm lips and hot breath, the wild look in blue eyes. Sakura shivered. Even wrapped in Naruto's extra shirt, the rapidly dropping temperature was cold enough she felt miserable. The storm that was rolling in was moving fast. They were on their way back from a mission, still too far from Konoha to make it back before it broke loose. This time of the year was known for its quick storms, but thankfully, not the funnels that would tear up large tracts of land. Still, the Dark Line said the storm was going to be violent. They had been hunting actively for shelter since Sasuke had seen the approaching line of clouds. "This is all you found?" Sakura questioned, her voice doubtful. In front of her was a tree as wide as her arms outstretched. It was entirely hollow, and might fit all three of them if they squished together. Really, really close together. "Fuck," Naruto muttered. Sasuke narrowed his eyes. "It's all we have." The first fat, cold raindrop hit her cheek and she jumped. "We better hurry." Things had been so much easier when they were genin. Sasuke didn't have those damn long legs that got in the way of everything and cramped so damn easily, and Naruto wasn't so broad in the shoulders. It was impossible for Sakura to squish between them as they did as genin, and so she ended up sprawled over both their laps, shivering as she watched the thick curtain of gray rain hit the dirt just inches from her fingertips. Sasuke had known a jutsu that acted as a thin barrier between them and the rain, keeping both him and Naruto from being soaked from the thighs down. However, the situation couldn't be comfortable for either man. She was pressing against Naruto in a well, she was pressing rather firmly against Naruto. If she shifted, her knees would knock Sasuke in the chin. Sasuke's legs barely fit inside the trunk, and were rather oddly tangled with Naruto's. "It's a good thing you're both straight." Sasuke snorted and Naruto laughed, the sound rumbling against his shoulder. "Dirty thoughts, Sakura-chan?" She drove her elbow into his gut and he wheezed, head resting against her shoulder. "Just making an observation, idiot." Naruto rubbed his chest. "I thought we had a no-violence rule while in small, confined areas." Sasuke shook his head. "You ruined that in the cave over the last piece of fish." "If you both remember, I ended that one," Sakura said calmly. "Don't make me do it again." Her elbow drove back again at what suspiciously sounded like Naruto calling her mommy. Ignoring the way he gasped for air, she held out her hand to Sasuke. "Let me see your arm." He twitched, muscles bunching along his shoulders, and she narrowed her eyes. "My feet are not exactly in the safest place for your personal safety, Sasuke." "Arm." Silently he handed over the damaged appendage. Running her fingers along the wound she had closed the night before, Sakura nodded in satisfaction before letting just enough chakra sink into his pathways to finish the healing. Away from Konoha, she had to be careful with how much chakra she used when healing the team, especially if there was a chance she couldn't rest or eat as she needed to regain what she had used. Not that she minded using her chakra to heal them, but Sasuke and Naruto were particularly testy about it. Once she was satisfied that the injury was healed, she let her fingers drop and nodded at him. He nodded in thanks and they were quiet as they watched the storm. However, watching the storm was only fascinating for so long. Sighing heavily, she turned her head against Naruto's throat and watched Sasuke. He looked tired. She wondered how much sleep he was actually getting when they weren't on missions. She had noticed that he seemed to sleep heavy when it wasn't his watch. It spoke for how much he trusted them to watch his back that he slept better when on missions than when at home. She couldn't blame him. Sometimes she woke up at night and reached for bodies that weren't there. "Hey, Sasuke-kun," the childhood name rolled from her tongue before she could catch it. Biting her lip at the way he opened on eyes, she sighed. "Are you sleeping at all when we are on missions?" "Some." She jabbed him a little with her heel. "You're back to one-word sentences." He closed his eyes, ignoring her. Huffing, she wiggled a little to find better position against Naruto. "Sakura," Naruto's voice was a bit rough. "I don't mind much, but when a woman wiggles around on a man's lap, he has a reaction." She froze. "Right." Sasuke sighed. "Idiot." "What?" The sound of ice hitting the tree and the ground had her leaning a little closer against Naruto. She wasn't scared of storms, per se, but if they ended up in the path of one of those air funnels. "Don't worry," Naruto told her, hand running up and down her arm. "If one of those funnel things sets down, we'll know and I'll just call a toad to get us the hell away." Sakura relaxed. She hadn't thought about that. It would be a wet, wild, Probably dangerous ride and one she hoped to avoid, but the knowledge that there was an escape plan was comforting in the way only giant frogs were. She frowned when she realized her foot was falling asleep. Getting out of this tree trunk is going to be difficult, she muttered. How come? Naruto asked. Unless you know a medical jutsu that I don't that keeps your legs from falling asleep, we're all going to have crawl out of here, she pointed out. She felt him move with his grimace. I hadn't thought of that. At least we're not wet, Sasuke pointed out. Fingering the sleeves that currently flopped over her hands, she mentally agreed with Sasuke. Being wet was only worse when you were wet and cold. The storm was still dropping temperatures. Thankfully, Naruto and Sasuke were plenty warm. How long do you think they are going to let us hunt Nin? Sakura asked quietly, curling her fingers into a fist inside her sleeves. For a moment she thought that Naruto and Sasuke had both fallen asleep, and then Naruto sighed. For as long as they can get away with it, I suppose. She nodded. Chasing Nin serves two purposes for the council, Sasuke said mildly. It gives us a chance to be killed, and it gets Naruto out of their hair. Sakura frowned. Yes, but it's also blatantly flaunting Naruto in the face of the Akatsuki. There have to be rumors of us fighting Nin by now. Naruto's body moved under her as he shrugged. Maybe they just can't win at everything. Then why send me? Sakura questioned, curious to see what they had reasoned behind her back. Liability, Sasuke said flatly. They know how Naruto responds to you being danger. Naruto snorted. Oh please. Kakashi probably had to report the fight with Kisame, which means they know you're really just a great big mother hen, bastard. Sasuke's eyes narrowed and Sakura spoke quickly. This was not the time to be fighting. I can take care of myself. We know, Naruto said. He shifted, and she could almost feel the stare he was directing at her profile. Although I wouldn't think blowing yourself up is a good way to take care of yourself, Sakura-chan. She thought about elbowing him, and decided against it. Sasuke? The council considers you a liability, he said finally. Even though you are the Hokage's apprentice. Which is a mistake. Especially if they wish to maintain the illusion of power. You want to explain that one team? Rumors suggest that Hinata is slowly winning the battle inside the Hyuga compound. The branch house supports her mostly over her sister. Hanabi merely has the support of some of the older members of the clan, but her temperament is such that it is unlikely she will maintain that support. I suspect there will be a subtle shifting of power inside the council in the future. Sasuke mused, a small smile quirking the edges of his mouth. Sakura considered that. Maybe it was time she started keeping her ears open again. Tsunade had never really bothered censoring her tongue around her or Shizen. She knew the sector supporting Tsunade was likely to be a wellspring of information, especially when it came to how the council was dealing with the Uchiha and the Kyuubi vessel. It was a matter of waiting everyone out, now. She and Sasuke had spent the last 3 months carefully feeding Shikamaru and Neji the information they needed to gain support. Everything was set to come out as they wanted, with the few expectations, the bumps that were inevitable, if all three of them could just stay alive long enough to see their plans through to the end. The Jounin exams are coming up, Sakura said softly, deliberately changing the subject. It was something she had wanted to discuss with them anyway. Naruto ran a hand down her arm. Are you thinking about taking them? Sakura sighed. Tsunade and I have been talking. She thinks it will be helpful in the future. If I can summon Katsuyu by the time enrollment for the trials begins, then I plan on going for it. Naruto frowned. Summoning takes a lot of chakra. Sakura nodded. Yes, usually. Sasuke cracked an eye open. Sakura. Tsunade and I are working on a way around it. She bit her lip and widened her eyes. I'll tell you about it if it works. Jounin exams are tough, Naruto mused, breaking their starring match. He was clearly satisfied by her answer. They really go out of the way to test your skills. Her genjutsu skills will be an assist. Sasuke reminded them, closing his eyes again. I can only think of a handful of Jounin they would set against her who have the ability to see through genjutsu and deal with her strength. Naruto nodded. Yeah. True. Should be interesting. Good thing you learned the genjutsu. Sakura snorted. Like I had any choice. Sasuke shrugged, unapologetic. The few days she had the chakra, Sasuke had spent drilling her in genjutsu, usually against Naruto. She wasn't a master, but once Tsunade had realized what she was doing, she had slipped her a few scrolls to read as well. It was a matter of control, and instead of using her chakra for strength, she just had to twist it in a different way. Sort of like twisting a slime-covered ball of pudding into shape and holding it. Her illusions weren't large, but when she managed to pull one off, they were solid. She was getting very good at seeing through them. We should get some rest, Sasuke suggested, shutting his eyes. I refuse to carry either of you back because you're stupid enough to get stabbed. I could have healed him. I was covering your ass. Shut up. I'll keep watch, Naruto offered with a growl. If that's acceptable, Sasuke? It took a few minutes for the rearranging of limbs so that she and Sasuke were both comfortable in sleep. Her cheek was resting against Naruto's collarbones now, and Sasuke's legs were stretched out a little further thanks to Naruto shifting his shoulders around. The storm had picked up until it was almost deafening, but with Naruto under her fingertips, and Sasuke trying to pretend her knee wasn't lodged into his side, she was warm and safe. Naruto stared at the clouds that were taking something of a shape above him. Winter rains were going to be moving in soon. That one could have been a pineapple, if Chuji had already taken a chunk out of it with his teeth. That one looked like a bird with one wing, and that one looked like a toad. Sort of. If he crossed his eyes a little. I hope your face gets stuck like that, Sasuke chided mildly. You're just jealous of my face, Naruto returned, closing his eyes. HN. He could ignore silly Sasuke comments today. He was in a good mood. If the day was to get any better, it would have to involve Sakura. Possibly in that nurse's uniform she detested. You're not giving her any reasons to notice you. That had him sitting up. Blinking at Sasuke, he frowned at his friend. Huh? Sasuke gave him an irritated glance. Sakura. You are not giving her any reason to notice you as more than a friend. Yes, I am. You move like a snail. Naruto frowned. You don't have any room to be talking, team. Sasuke reached over and clipped him in the back of the skull. Pay attention. I'm not chasing Sakura. You are. Do something about it soon. I'm tired of watching you go nowhere. Naruto frowned, crossing his arms behind his head. Maybe he was right. He liked the fact that Sakura was so comfortable with him, he liked that she didn't mind when he had an arm around her shoulders, and that she seemed to enjoy having him in her home. It was a nice home. Maybe Sasuke was right. He did need to do something that would get her mind off friendship and onto something else. Don't screw it up. Naruto ignored that comment. He never screwed up. Well, when it was important. Most of the time when it was important. Crap. Hey Sasuke, you got any ideas? Sasuke stood up and walked away. Naruto sighed. Well, he supposed he was in this one on his own. Flopping onto his back, arms still behind his head, he watched the clouds and thought. Sakura, Shizen's soft voice broke into her exhausted daze. You should go home. She lifted her eyes and blinked at the concerned medic Nin. Shizen wasn't scheduled to come on duty for another 3 hours. Scrubbing at dry eyes, she looked at the clock. Was it really that late? Tsunade said that you have done enough and the next shift is here. They'll take over for now, Sakura. Hands were turning her and pointing her towards the door. Her body went through the automatic reactions. Wash the blood off her hands. Change out of her uniform, put it in her bag, and head back to her dark apartment in the hopes of getting some sleep. Halfway home, she stopped. As much as she wanted to sleep, she wanted to spend some time with someone else. Going home to a cold apartment was suddenly a task that was just too much for her emotionally drained self. Her feet turned to a familiar direction, but she stopped herself. Her parents had stopped being able to help her since her genin days. While they might sympathize with what she had to be going through at the hospital, they wouldn't understand. They couldn't understand why civilians in her care were so much harder than healing shinobi. The idea that shinobi could take care of themselves, that they had been hurt for a purpose, was one thing. A civilian being hurt, little civilian children being burned, was something completely different. She had pushed herself into exhaustion dealing with the injuries that had come in after a civilian apartment complex had caught fire, and she was feeling the drain. Curling her fingers around her keyring, she headed a different direction. The door she was shuffling toward wasn't as nice as her parents' small, perfect home. It was part of a slightly run-down complex, but it was strangely clean and neat, even if the blue paint on the door was chipped. The key turned smoothly in the lock. She knew the sound of the lock sneaking out of place would wake him, just as the fact that she hadn't set off his taps would tell him who exactly was walking into his apartment. Sasuke would be expected to dodge at least one trap, just for practice sake. Shutting the door behind her, she leaned against it, breathing in deeply to steady herself as she waited for Naruto to appear. She might have taken some liberty with the key he had given her with that half-smile, but she would never enter further without his permission. A light kicked on, and Naruto stepped out of his bedroom, his hand rubbing his eyes. They blinked at her for a moment before he shook his head. Hey, Sakura-chan, something wrong? Can I stay here? She had to give Naruto credit. When his friends needed him, he was terribly efficient. Half an hour after stumbling into his apartment, she was wearing an oversized shirt and a pair of old shorts, a cup of tea firmly in hand that, while faintly bitter, made up for it because it was warm. He was sitting next to her, waiting with a patience that most would never believe he was capable of. There was a fire tonight, she said quietly, finding enough energy to speak only after half a cup of tea. They're looking into what started it, but it was in one of the civilian areas. Naruto's arm slid across her shoulder. She could have stopped talking there. She knew he understood instinctively where the root of her distress was coming from. She savored that moment before continuing, needing to talk about it now. Most of the individuals were small children, most of it was smoke inhalation, but we had a few that were severely burned. Her fists clenched around her teacup. Damn it, I can't stop thinking that if any of them had had even the most basic of training, then none of this would have happened. They panicked and they got hurt. Fingers tugged the teacup out of her hands. She locked her fingers together, her knuckles turning white with the strain. Warm hands pulled her into his lap and his arms settled around her stiff form. It's all right, Sakura, he soothed. I know you did your best. Biting her lip, she reached up to scrub her face with one hand. I'm sorry to unload on you. His breath stirred her hair. I told you to come to me if you needed to talk to someone, remember? She twisted around and pressed her nose against his neck. He didn't seem to mind, settling one arm around her hip. The other hand tangled at the base of her skull, threading through her hair and massaging her scalp. She took several, even breaths, and centered herself. Breaking down now wouldn't do any good, and she had promised a long time ago that she would never cry about things she couldn't change. She was just tired. You should be in bed, he told her quietly. Come on, I'll tuck you in. She tightened her grip and swallowed. Will you stay too? The fingers tangled in her hair twisted, just a touch. Sakura? I just don't want to be alone yet. She sighed. Never mind, I'll take the couch. I'm shorter. She went to untangle herself from around him. He made a noise in his throat, standing smoothly, shifting his grip so that his arm rested just below the curve of her bottom. Squeaking, she hooked a leg around him and held on. Come on, he said, hefting her a little. Do you want to shower? She shook her head. No. I washed up a little at the hospital. Unless you think I smell like blood. His lips curved against her ear. A little, but it's all right. I don't think I have any clean towels anyway. I'll put a load in the wash, and you can shower in the morning. "Kay," she agreed, relieved that he was going to let her maintain her connection a little longer. He was true to his word, tucking her into his bed with a few teasing remarks, and then he disappeared. The hum of water pipes had her eyes closing. She was half asleep by the time he returned and settled next to her smoothly. It was enough that he was close enough to touch, the sound of his breathing relaxing the tight muscles in her back and stomach so that she eventually fell asleep. Naruto woke her up twice, once to go and put the towels in the dryer, and once just before dawn. Rolling onto her side, she watched him sleepily as he pulled clothes out of his closet and into a very familiar pack. You have a mission? Her voice was gravelly from sleep, and she knew she must look a mess, but when he turned, his smile wasn't at all mocking. Yes. I'll be gone a few days. He turned back to his packing and she sat up, attempting to clear the sludge that had settled between her ears when she was sleeping. Once she felt a little coherent, she realized he was already dressed. I'm sorry to keep you up last night, she mumbled. He laughed softly, walking over and sitting on her side of the bed. Fingers brushed away her hair softly. Go back to sleep, Sakura-chan. It's just now dawn. I'll let Tsunade know you're going to be a little late this morning. She blinked at him. I should really go in. His eyes narrowed. In her sleep-fogged brain, she was startled by how much Fox was bleeding out of him. The early morning light burnished his hair and brought out the whisker marks on his cheeks. The narrow strip of blue that wasn't hidden by his lashes was so very bright. Stay in bed, Sakura-chan. Get some rest. Before she could argue, he had leaned forward and pressed his mouth to the corner of hers. It wasn't exactly a kiss, but it was surprising enough that whatever argument she was going to make melted in her brain. Rough fingertips smoothed across her cheek. Get some rest. Then he was picking up his bag and moving out of the bedroom, leaving her with her fingers pressed to the corner of her mouth. Sakura stared at the remains of her lunch. It was hard to eat when your brain wasn't really into the mechanics of it. Using her chopstick to grind tiny, individual grains of rice into mush, she frowned. Naruto had kissed her. The edge of her mouth still tingled. She had tried to talk to Ino about it, but the words had died in her throat as her friend watched her with unblinking eyes. She already knew what Ino's advice was going to be. She would tell her to go for it. Her fingers tightened around her chopstick. Go for what? If she could just get her brain to stop replaying the faint feel of slightly chapped lips, hot breath, and the way her stomach had tightened in response to both, she might be able to figure it out what it was that Naruto was thinking. Or what he wasn't thinking, but even that wasn't fair because Naruto did think. He just didn't think the same way she did. Sighing, she set the chopsticks down and lifted her cup of hot tea to her lips and sipped. When they had been younger, she knew Naruto had had a crush on her. Everyone had known it. She had just assumed he had outgrown it around the time that they had put their entire lives into saving Sasuke. Even if he had promised her he would bring him back, there had never been any doubt that Naruto would have pulled down mountains if he had needed to. She should have seen this coming. The way she had noticed him watching her, that kiss on her palm after Kisame. Shivering a little, she ran her finger through her bangs. Okay. So Naruto was probably interested. How did she feel about that? She couldn't say it wasn't a matter of attraction both ways. There had been too many encounters over the past year that told her the attraction was mutual. Still, that didn't tell her what she wanted to do about it. Standing up, she gathered her things, dropping the correct amount of coin on the table. She had to get back to work. She just didn't have the time needed to think this through right now. If she was lucky, Naruto's mission would keep him gone long enough that she could think it through. Sakura brushed her bangs out of her eyes and hefted her basket a little higher. For once after a late shift, she had had the energy to shop for food. Even so, choices always became harder at this time of night. Why did they make so many brands of cheese? Reaching up to rub the bridge of her nose, she sighed. This store mostly catered to shinobi. What shinobi ate fat-free cheese? Shaking her head, she reached for a random brand that seemed to be normal and put it in the bag. Looking at the list she had put together, she pulled a pen out between her teeth and marked it off. Aren't you supposed to be in bed? She almost stabbed herself with her pen. Naruto. I was wondering where you had disappeared to. He continued, as if she hadn't spoken. I stopped by and you weren't home. I just got off shift, she said with an eye roll. I need food. You haven't eaten? Her eyes narrowed and she studied him. So says the man who has yet to shower. He shrugged carelessly, his grin firmly in place. Annoyed because that smile was doing funny things to her insides, she shoved her basket firmly into his gut. He umphed, hands closing around the wicker as she twisted around. If you're going to annoy me, be useful. I'm always useful, Sakura-chan. Except when you're not, she pointed out, refusing to acknowledge that her stomach was twisting itself in knots. It had absolutely nothing to do with how he smelled like the woods, or the way his mouth had kicked up slightly more in one corner than the other. Running her fingers through her short bangs, she closed her eyes tiredly. She really didn't want to have to deal with this right now. She wasn't ready to deal with Naruto and the way he confused her. It figured that he would show up when she least wanted to deal with him. She hadn't had the necessary time to think about this yet. Sakura-chan, Naruto's dry voice broke into her thoughts. Did you mean to buy sardines? I thought you didn't like them. She paused where she was reaching for a can of something. Blinking, she turned back to her basket and frowned at it. I don't. He lifted a brow. Sakura, why are you shopping so late? I don't have anything for breakfast? So you have a jar of peanut butter, a pound of rice, sardines, and a block of fake cheese? Sakura stared at her basket. She remembered grabbing the cheese, but the rest of the contents were foreign to her. Blinking several times, she looked back to her list. Right, Naruto muttered. Setting the basket down, then he reached over and grasped her by the shoulders. Come on, Sakura-chan. Naruto, her tone was flat. That was my basket. Anger was always better than butterflies. Butterflies were distracting and led her thoughts down a path that wasn't acceptable at this time of night. Not acceptable when she didn't know what she wanted them to mean yet. I really don't think anything in that basket is going to be edible, Naruto told her, a smile in his voice. I mean, trust me, peanut butter and rice just don't go well together. I'm not sure what you planned on doing with the cheese. She tilted around, frowning at him as they stepped outside. Huh? He slid his arm around her shoulder, guiding her down the street. Don't worry about it. We'll just raid Sasuke's cabinets in the morning and make him fix us breakfast. She eyed him. Do you think he knows how to cook breakfast? The type of breakfast real people eat? He makes good onigiri, Naruto said thoughtfully. His miso is a bit off though. He is stingy with the tofu. How often do you eat breakfast with Sasuke? Not as often as I like, he sighed, his arms slipping from her shoulders to settle around her waist instead, his palm on her hip bone. Free food should never be turned down, especially if I don't have to cook it. Sasuke is possessive of his pans. Sakura swallowed. All thoughts of sleep fled at the feel of Naruto pressed up against her side, the hard muscle of his arm at her back, the heat of his palm at her hip. Chewing on the inside of her lip, she reached up to rub the bridge of her nose. What was she supposed to do with this man? Looking up, she caught sight of her apartment. Nervousness tingled in her stomach, but she set her jaw. She needed to get this solved or she wasn't going to be able to sleep. Naruto? Sakura took a deep breath. What are you doing? Did you remember to grab your keys or are we going to have to break in? Naruto asked, looking at the front door of her apartment, his expression thoughtful. I have my keys, she said, twisting around so she was facing him. He hadn't let go of her waist yet, so she was a lot closer than she had anticipated being. Swallowing a little, took a deep breath. You're avoiding the question. Which question, Sakura-chan? She pressed her fingers against his hand, her brow lifting. What exactly you are doing? The smile left his face. His other hand came up and pushed her bangs out of her eyes. What are you doing for breakfast? Apparently bumming off Sasuke, she told him, eyes narrowing at his continued refusal to talk to her. Why? Lunch? Naruto. A blonde brow arched. You're making it rather difficult to ask you out, Sakura-chan. She stared at him. The edges of his mouth curved upwards and he leaned down, kissing the edge of her mouth again. Go to bed. I'll be by at dawn to make sure you're awake enough for breakfast. She blinked at him as he walked away, hands shoved deep into his pockets, a faint, whistling tune echoing back at her. Pressing her hand to her temples, she wondered if she pleaded temporary insanity if she could just hide in her room until she figured this out. Unfortunately, she didn't have time to hide in her room. Life had stopped giving her those little moments to herself when she turned 12 and lost her childhood to being a shinobi. With the Jounin trials coming soon, Sakura found herself splitting her time with Tsunade in the hospital and on the practice field learning moves her master thought were important when she wasn't chasing Sound Ninja with her team. She stumbled home every night, wondering if Kakashi had ever been such a taskmaster. Thankfully, Shizen, knowing both Sakura and Tsunade too well, brought them meals. Sakura never had the energy to cook once she returned home, and would have lived off of trail rations had the kind medic me not made a point to feed them at least once a day. Once or twice a week she would find herself eating ramen with Naruto and Sasuke, or whatever place Sasuke badgered Naruto into going instead. Those moments were hardly ever long enough for more than inhaling lunch and asking a few questions before she was out the door again. More embarrassing had been the time she had just fallen asleep against Sasuke for the entire lunch hour, waking up with just enough time to inhale an onigiri or two before going back to work. She was highly suspicious of Naruto being behind her making it to her bed every night. Her memories of the past month held the vague impression of warmth and the wild, woodsy scent that she associated with Naruto was sometimes on her pillows. Some nights, the couch was the farthest she could manage to coach her tired, aching legs to carry her. She would have crashed on her floor if there had even been a rug. If Tsunade made training any more difficult, she was going to borrow a futon from Ino and throw it into her living room. Sakura would have pulled her own hair out if she hadn't been able to see the differences in herself with the extra training. As a child she would have wailed at her shoulders and upper arms, worried that they made her look like a man. Even though her chakra control was damn near perfect, it was important that she had larger reserves and the stamina to use what she had. More importantly still, she had to be able to handle the strain of a hard fight and be able to save the lives of her two teammates. That pushed her more than anything. Strength training was a big part of that. Now she looked at herself and saw something her childhood self would have been horrified at, but the woman she was could find satisfaction in. 3 days from now was the Jounin exams. Sakura recognized the smell before anything really registered. It was as familiar as her favorite perfume and it clung to everything that it touched, antiseptic, blood, and the faintest scent of heated air that came with chakra use. The only question was, what was she doing in the hospital? Her short-term memory wasn't working properly, and she was having a hard time placing the events that had recently occurred. She should be coming around soon. Tsunade's voice was recognizable even in her daze. There was a note of brisk exasperation that she had found herself copying over the years, but rarely had directed at her. She usually saved it for problem patients like Kakashi-sensei, not her. Taking a deep breath, she started coughing immediately, her lungs and ribs painfully contracting with the heavy motion. Sakura-chan? Cold hands pressed against her chest, and she was immediately able to breathe easier. The coughing jarred her memory of pressure and pain, and it took a few moments later before she was able to put all the pieces together. This time, her groan was from more memory than the pain. Sakura? This time it was Tsunade instead of Naruto, and she kept her eyes stubbornly shut. Kakashi. Her Jounin exam had been against Kakashi. Now she understood why she felt like she had been stuck in a blender. It would figure that after months and months of struggling with her genjutsu, she would go up against someone who her complex genjutsu was absolutely wasted on. Training with Sasuke had taught her a little of what to expect in a flat-out battle with him, but not enough that she hadn't needed to do that. Naruto was going to kill her. She had held her own fairly well. Kakashi seemed more interested in testing her skills than taking her down. She had managed to land more than one chakra-enhanced punch, and then she had Right. That probably hadn't been the best idea. If the pounding of her skull and the heat in her ribs and back said anything, it had been a terrible idea. It took some work to keep the satisfied smile off her face. It had worked though. Something, or Kakashi, had apparently flattened her after her little trap, but it had worked well enough that she was almost positive that Kakashi was somewhere in the hospital as well. It had worked. Lying there in the hospital bed, she ignored the hands that were pressing against her lungs and carefully tested the memory. Of all the possible jounin they could have thrown at her, Kakashi had been the last she would have considered. She had thought he was still out fighting Akatsuki. Apparently not. When fighting someone at Kakashi's skill level, her normal approach would have been to flatten them as soon as possible. The problem with her old sensei was that he was quite aware of what she could and could not do with her hits, and he knew the feel of her chakra. The fact that he hadn't uncovered his Sharingan from the start had given her an idea. Complex genjutsu was wasted on a Sharingan, and adept users could move very quickly in and out of them. However, fighting Naruto had required something else. Her training with Naruto, under Sasuke's very watchful eyes, had served two purposes. The first had been to teach her the art, the second was to help Naruto learn at least to recognize when he was being attacked with genjutsu. So instead of using deep, complex layers, she had thrown them at her teammate as quickly and as thickly as possible. It was the same method she had hit Kakashi with. Using her strength to hide the carefully controlled weave of low-level genjutsu, all her summoning techniques had taught her something after all. She had carefully started her third trap. Once she sprang the accumulated low-level genjutsu, she had figured a possible 30 seconds before Kakashi had worked through them. Everything had worked as she had planned, except for that last trap. Groaning at another burst of chakra from Tsunade, she coughed violently. Next time she set up a trap like that and used explosive tags, she was going to make sure she wasn't spread quite so thin. She was going to be lucky if she ended up with just a lecture from Sasuke on the safe distance from explosions, much less Naruto. Currently though, she had another problem. She could either wake up to tell Tsunade what was hurting or she could keep her eyes shut and hope that Sasuke and Naruto would be gone when she woke up again. Sakura, Tsunade's voice held a note this time that told her she wasn't going to get any more time to herself. Sighing, she gave in to the inevitable and blinked her eyes open, wincing at the lights of the room, and the expression on the faces behind Tsunade. Ah, you are awake then. Kakashi? A few broken bones. Only one of the cuts we deep enough for us to worry, nothing we couldn't heal. Your head wound, on the other hand, we wanted to keep an eye on. She clucked her tongue. Sakura winced. Head injuries, even with perfect chakra control, were tricky. Surface injuries were easily healed, but it was best to leave the internal bruising to nature. Someone who came in with a ruined kidney had less hospital time than someone with a major concussion did. Did I pass? Tsunade crossed her arms and sighed. We haven't received word from the judges yet, but it took them half an hour to clear the testing grounds so the next match could be presented. A faint, flickering smile curved her lips. Kakashi will be sporting an interesting scar. It probably wouldn't have been so bad if she hadn't committed herself to winning. Odds were anything less than everything would have failed her. Unfortunately, she had either overestimated herself, underestimated Kakashi, or she had just put too much strain on her chakra control. She wasn't entirely sure which. Another one of those things she was going to have to think about when she wasn't ignoring two very irritated men. Men who were irritated at her for doing her job even if she had taken a very small, if only slightly unnecessary risk. Well, you're going to have that concussion for a few days until your natural healing abilities kick in, Tsunade said finally, her fingers probing the wound on the back of her skull carefully. I would suggest having someone stick around to check on you, but I don't think that is going to be a problem. Sakura closed her eyes. She had read a story once, about a ninja who had painted jutsu signs on a pair of strange shoes and then just clicked her heels out of danger. Transportation scrolls were difficult, and dangerous to carry into enemy territory, but who looked at shoes? Hearing the sounds of Tsunade walking away, she internally cringed. She really needed to look into something. Fingers laced with hers, and she cautiously opened her eyes to face her fate. Sasuke's eyes were black as normal, so there was some relief there. But the dark blue band that normally was only visible around the pupil had spread until it had consumed most of Naruto's natural eye color, leaving only the faintest edge of bright sky blue. Even without looking for tell-all sparks of red behind the black of his pupil, it was easy to see that he was extremely upset with her. Tsunade said we couldn't yell at you, Naruto said flatly. So Sasuke wrote everything down so I could remember what to yell at you about later, in case I forget. Sakura stopped a groan only by force of will. You passed, Sasuke said quietly, hands in his pockets. Sakura blinked at him. Tsunade just said. Sasuke lifted a brow and she stopped talking. You passed. There were a million possibilities in those words, and she was just too tired to work through them. At least she knew that Sasuke wouldn't risk her life and get her promoted early through a few well-placed threats. That meant he had to have a source, and damn it, her head hurt. Ino is over at your place putting your stuff together, Naruto said. You're staying at Sasuke's until you are 100 recovered from your concussion. I'm not going to argue, Naruto interrupted. Not one word, Sakura. Her eyes narrowed. Sasuke snorted and left. She didn't really pay attention to where he was going, her irritation being directed at the man in front of her. His own eyes were narrowed, heat burning and curious red sparks behind them. Clenching her teeth, she closed her eyes and counted to 20. It was never easy to argue with Naruto, he was too bullheaded, but trying to argue with him when she couldn't hit him was even worse. Opening her eyes, she was startled to see how close his face was. The anger was banked now, shielded by a contemplative expression that had the small hairs on the back of her neck lifting in warning. Swallowing nervously, she shifted backwards against her pillow a little. When is Tsunade going to let me leave? Sasuke went to take care of the paperwork and to find lunch. He returned, not moving away. Oh. Those eyes narrowed a little. You are in trouble, you know. I didn't do anything you wouldn't, Sakura challenged. He could have given 100 responses to that verbal dare. She just hadn't expected this one. His lips were hot, chapped from exposure and his one nervous habit, but as they pressed against hers, she couldn't care. The fingers against her jaw were calloused, and her chest tightened in shock and surprise. The tip of his tongue stroked her bottom lip once, and then he was a foot away from her, watching her from those narrowed, sparking eyes. I'll get Sasuke and make sure everything is in order. Take a nap if you want. Tsunade said sleep was good for your injuries since she stabilized your concussion. Fingertips pressed against her bottom lip, eyes wide, she watched his retreating back. Sakura woke slowly, automatically blinking sleep from her eyes. To her relief, the faintly hovering black spots in her vision were no longer impairing her sight. That meant that the careful healing meditations she had been slowly forcing herself into were working. There was still a pounding headache behind her eyes, but it was no longer so unbearable that the lights and faintest noises hurt. Sasuke had been forcing a particularly horrible broth down her throat, really, that was punishment enough, that had helped combat her nausea. Rolling slowly onto her side, she blinked at the window. The sun was starting to set. She didn't hear the sounds of Naruto or Sasuke moving around in the kitchen, and she tried to remember what Naruto had told her over lunch. Something about a report to Tsunade about something. Slowly sitting up, she tested her body. Her head didn't spin around, and to her relief, even sliding out of the bed didn't upset her internal equilibrium. Pleased, she sat on the edge of the bed and considered her options. Today had been a strange mingling of exhaustion and a pounding headache that reminded her of the many times she had drained her chakra to nothing and tried to keep going. Reaching up, she ghosted her fingers against the spot where a blow had landed. She hoped Kakashi had the brains to avoid Naruto and Sasuke. Handling both of them would have been a challenge for even the copy ninja. Naruto. Well, even with a pounding headache, this had given a chance to consider her relationship with the energetic blonde. Never let it be said that a concussion wasn't good for something. Her though process might have been choppy and painful, but she had managed to think. Which was more than the past few months had given her. Time always gave her a chance to come to some realizations, and this hadn't been an exception. She liked being kissed by Naruto. She just didn't know what to do about it. This wasn't like Sasuke. There was blood, sweat, and oaths between them. The bonds couldn't be broken easily, but this was one of the things that could ruin everything. She was torn between nervous anticipation and nausea. Some of that was probably from the concussion, but the way her stomach twisted in on itself wasn't helping. She needed to breathe. Air that wasn't tinted with Naruto, Sasuke's, and her own skin. Running her hands through her bangs, she decided a walk would be a good idea. She was going to get a lecture, well, what was one more? But at least a walk would give her a chance to clear her head enough to formulate the arguments necessary to deal with Naruto logic. Wincing, she rubbed her temples at the thought. Naruto logic. Now she was actually considering dating the man? Walking to the closet, she hunted down a long-sleeved shirt that Naruto had left in the small closet and pulled it over her head. It wouldn't snow for a few more weeks, but it was chilly outside. Carefully listening for the sounds of anyone approaching, she moved to the window. It took some work, but she finally wiggled out the absurdly small window before crawling down the side of the wall with the careful application of chakra. Her head spun a little, but when her headache didn't increase, she took it as a good sign that her concussion was healing. She walked slowly, enjoying the change of surroundings and the warm air. Finding a bench, she settled down and sighed, closing her eyes. There was so much she still had to think through. Naruto was one of the biggies, but so was her future. Jounin, Sasuke, the council. It was all enough to give her a migraine. Reaching up to rub her temples, she blinked at the sound of someone calling her name. Sakura. Lee's cheerful face greeted her as she turned to find him waving her down, legs moving quickly as he caught up. Thankfully, he seemed to be the only one around and there wasn't any sign of Naruto or Sasuke yet. Sakura, Lee's eyebrows were drawn down with disapproval. I wasn't aware you were supposed to be out of bed yet. I decided I needed fresh air. When his eyebrows drew down even further, she leveled him with her best stare. I'm a medic, Nin. I am perfectly capable of deciding when I can get up and move around. Not that Sasuke or Naruto were going to be particularly enthusiastic about that defense. Lee, however, gave in. She doubted it had anything to do with her glare, and everything to do with the fact that she dragged him back to bed after injuries. He was probably going to save this, and use it against her at a later date. Oh well. She would just sick 10-10 on him. Well, then I shall sit with you while you breathe in the fresh night air. You will? Of course. It would be beneath the valor of my own heart to leave such a graceful flower to defend herself in a wounded state from the evils of the common world. There was the faintest spark of mischief behind the dark of Lee's eyes. She never would have known to look for it if it hadn't been for an off comment from Tenten. Still, Lee was probably the only person who could have managed to not only sit her down on a bench, but also convince her to stay while he dashed off to locate a hot cup of tea for her. You really didn't have to get the tea, Lee. You were chilled. If I had let you stay in the cold, I would have had to do 500 push-ups. Really, there was just no arguing with the man. Adulthood had only managed to temper his energy and enthusiasm. Maybe. She wasn't sure anything could temper his enthusiasm for long. Taking another sip of her warm beverage, she felt some of the tension in her shoulders relax. Closing her eyes, she breathed deeply before pausing. Cracking open an eye, she turned and pinned Lee with her best I am in charge look. Why would you have had to do 500 push-ups? Lee paused, his eyes widening beneath his bushy brows. Sakura. I could not. You were at the meeting with Naruto and Sasuke. Guilt colored his cheeks an interesting shade of pink. I had the wonderful chance of speaking to your protectors. Tightening her grip on her mug, she leaned forward. Lee, did they ask you to check on me? It is likely, Lee said, keeping his eyes moving, that I mentioned that I wished to see how you were recovering. Huffing, she turned her face away. That isn't nice, Lee. The young man launched into a speech, but she wasn't paying any attention. Her eyes had landed on a figure moving silently down the gloom of the street, and she couldn't look away. Lee. To make sure that all is well. Lee. Beautiful flower of youth. Lee. This time her voice seemed to catch his attention. Dark eyes landed her face. Yes, Sakura? Why is the Kazekage here? Silence. Apparently she had discovered another temper for the energy that was Lee. Swallowing, Gaara was intimidating even when he wasn't trying to be. She had no promises that he was trying to behave himself just then either. Gamely, she straightened her posture. Sakura. Kazekage-sama, Sakura responded. Can I help you with something? He ignored her question and settled his gaze on Lee. Sakura had to give her friend credit. He bore under the scrutiny well. Studying his face, she decided it was the lack of eyebrows. It took away familiar expressions. Darting her eyes back and forth between the men, she narrowed her eyes when she caught yet another blush gracing Lee's face. Naruto sent both of you? Sakura blurted the words out before she could manage to stop them, and she soon found herself under close scrutiny instead. Setting her mouth in a heavy frown, she did her best to glower at both men. I cannot believe this. Setting her cup down, she crossed her arms. Lee at least had the grace to look abashed. Gaara ignored her irritation and chose instead to survey the surrounding areas. You passed. Sakura blinked. I beg your pardon. Those eyes flickered back at her, and Lee was strangely silent. You passed. She knew that. Oh. Staring at Sans Kazekage, she furiously attempted to put the pieces together around her growing headache. She had fought Kakashi. Tsunade had invited the Kazekage to watch the Jounin trials. This was allowed in their treaty as long as Gaara was willing to let in representatives of Leaf watch the next trials of Sand. More importantly, it was a political statement to the council that Gaara was considered an important ally and friend to Leaf, someone who had close ties to Naruto as a Jinchuriki and as a personal friend. Someone who held a position that Naruto made no pretense at wanting for himself when it came to Leaf. Political maneuvering. Her master was brilliant. This was making her head hurt. She was going to make Naruto's head hurt. Pursing her lips in irritation at the faint twitch to the Kazekage's lips, she leaned back a little further in her bench, wondered if she doing was supremely stupid, and opened her mouth anyway. How is your brother? It was probably a bit dangerous tossing that out like that in the middle of the street, but the question was safe enough as it was one of the few topics that Sakura could be credited to discussing with the Kazekage of Sand. It was well known that she had saved Kenkaro's life, after all, and it wouldn't do to let Gaara think he had come away with anything but even footing between them. She doubted anyone else would pick up the subtext between them, and if they did, there was enough that they wouldn't know that it was reasonable to expect them to be unable to connect those very important dots. Still among the living. Good. Sakura knew that Gaara knew that she wasn't overly interested in whether his brother was still alive or not, and the way he turned his shoulder to study the area around them said more than any eyebrows he might not have. He understood that she had gotten his message about what his presence meant at the trials, and he understood that he still owed her a debt for his brother's life. Even if his deliberate turning of his body was a delicate reminder that he would pay in his own time. She wondered if that sand wall was working again, and if a Kazekage bounced any differently than Naruto when they hit brick walls. Before she could decide if testing her theory was as stupid as her gut was telling her, a disapproving voice cut through her musings. Sakura-chan. You're supposed to be in bed. Twisting on the bench, she leveled Naruto with her most disapproving frown. To her surprise, it hardly fazed him as he breezed over to the bench, a frown of his own planted firmly on his face. It's cold outside. Lee got me tea. You have a concussion. Not anymore. You should be in bed. I got tired of counting cracks in the ceiling. Naruto scowled at her. You're at Sasuke's. There aren't any cracks in the ceiling. Narrowing her eyes, she glared at him. You sent 2 ninjas to babysit me. Did you even bother to tell Sasuke that they were going to be in his apartment? That's not the point. Ah. A crack in her dear friend's argument. Pouncing on the faint flicker of alarm in his eyes, she leaned back. So you didn't? That's not the point. Comfortable in her ability to turn the argument on its heel, she was startled when Naruto leaned forward, his eyes suddenly less than a finger's breadth from her own. You're hurt. His tone could have been soft except for the hard rumble of temper underneath. Her eyes widened at the sparks of red behind the black of his pupils. You should have stayed at Sasuke's. Naruto. He stood suddenly, his shoulders relaxing as he smiled at Gaara. How long are you going to stay? I will be leaving in the morning. Be safe. We haven't gotten rid of all the Sannin yet. Gaara gave a brief nod. Naruto, Sakura started again but was cut off when Naruto turned around and picked her up off the bench. Thanks for your help, Lee. My pleasure. Sakura held her tongue until they were far enough away she hoped the Kazekage couldn't hear them. She needed to maintain some dignity after all. Naruto. He stopped moving. They were tucked between 2 buildings halfway to Sasuke's. She could make out the outline of his jaw and the sparks in his eyes, and she wondered what he saw for a moment before she took a deep breath. Why are you carrying me? Muscles jumped along his arms and she frowned at him. Because we need to get back to Sasuke's and you have a concussion. The reasonable note in his voice didn't exactly cover his remaining temper. Scowling, she poked him hard in the shoulder. Put me down. No. This jab was chakra enhanced and he winced, but stubbornly held her. I mean it, Sakura. I'm carrying you back. Setting her teeth, she crossed her arms and studied the lines of his face. Something had happened. She didn't know if it was something from the meeting, or if it had happened during the time she had spent asleep at Sasuke's, but something had gotten under his skin. Are we alone? He started, but his nod came a moment later. You're sure? Sakura. Then start talking. His breath ghosted over her face as he exhaled, but he made no move to put her down. Kakashi finally got around to updating Tsunade about the Akatsuki's movements. Sakura pressed her lips together. It must have been important if Naruto was calling Tsunade by her actual name. Go on. Another sigh. They haven't given up. We knew that. He thinks it's just a matter of time before they make another move. Sakura bit her lip. Naruto. Tsunade thinks I should stop going on missions. You don't agree with her. I won't hide. There was an edge to Naruto's voice now. Sakura bit her lip and considered everything she had learned tonight. Gaara's silent power play on behalf of Naruto. Her own accomplishment to reach Jounin. Sasuke. The Akatsuki hadn't directly attacked Leaf yet, but she had to believe they knew enough of the village thanks to Itachi, the bastard deserved to rot in his grave, that they would be comfortable making such a move. They knew the strength of the clans that lived here, and they knew their own strength. If Naruto stayed at the village, there were multiple responses the council would have. The worst would be that they would use this to prove their point that Naruto was too dangerous to keep as a loose cannon, regardless of his loyalty to the village. The best would be that it would force the Hyuga's hand early, and they would discover exactly how much support Naruto had among the clan heads. Hinata was winning favor, but how much would be enough this early in the game? Sasuke legally had a vote, but there was no guarantee that his vote would be acknowledged. If the Akatsuki did attack, now would be the time to do it. Tsunade had worked hard to smooth things over inside Leaf, but there was still some unrest among the larger clans that had nothing to do with political positions. Naruto had the amazing ability to win friends wherever he went, but not even he could be everywhere at the same time. Some would never trust a container for a demon, regardless of his accomplishments. Sakura-chan? Which meant they were going to have to do some work themselves. She needed to speak to Shikamaru and Neji and couldn't. Blowing her bangs out of her face in exasperation, she tried to decide how much work it would take to get Ino alone long enough to ask her some pointed questions. Sakura? What they needed was a plan and a course of action to deal with this. Sakura. Blinking, she finally glanced up and stared at Naruto, whose face was suddenly a lot closer than it had been. She stared at him, and swallowed as now that he had her attention, instead of moving, he watched her. There was an expression in his eyes, a glint of something bright and sparking, and her mouth went dry. Sakura. She swallowed around the knot in her throat. His tone was soft, curiously gentle as he whispered the syllables of her name. Closing her eyes, she took a deep breath. Naruto. And waited. She didn't know what she was waiting for, but the faintly scratchy feeling of his cheek against hers wasn't it. Blinking her eyes open in surprise, she found herself staring at his hair. You're one of my precious people, you know that, right? Whatever it had been in his eyes, he had buried it again. Sighing in exasperation, she gave in and wrapped her arms around his shoulders. If you think you're going to leave me behind when you do go, I'll beat you so hard Tsunade has to put you in traction. I know. Good. Reaching up, she tangled her fingers in his hair for a moment. This was Naruto. Her Naruto. A faint smile tugging at her lips as she breathed in his scent deeply, she savored the moment before she fisted her hand in his hair and pulled. Hey! Sasuke is waiting for us, Sakura reminded him, tugging harder. I refuse to be on the end of one of those stairs from him because you made us late. Sakura-chan. His voice was a whine now, and she smiled vengefully and gave another firm tug. If you are going to insist on carrying me, you blonde idiot, then you can at least walk. Which I should be doing. Walking. Ow. Yes. Sakura. Ow. 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 That hurts Sakura-chan. Pansy. Ow. Sakura lowered her hands, panting a little with the force of the motions she had used to snap the jutsu into place. Kara lowered her hands, panting a little with the force of the motions she had used to snap the jutsu into place. Feeling the way the air hummed, she finally relaxed. Even Sasuke would have been impressed with that particular security measure. The jutsu wasn't very economical if you wanted something that would do more than warn you that someone was in hearing distance before dissipating. It was short-lived, she would have maybe 5 minutes. That was okay. She didn't need more than that. Squaring her shoulders, she stood in the middle of her living room and finally gave words to the thoughts that had been plaguing her for days. I'm falling in love with Uzumaki Naruto. She wasn't aware she had tensed every muscle in her body until her shoulders started to relax. She wasn't sure what she expected to happen, but Naruto didn't fall out of a closet and Ino didn't appear in her door. Her roof didn't fall in and there wasn't any sign of Itachi coming back from the dead, smelling a bouquet and quoting bad poetry. Kakashi hadn't appeared to tell her that he had sworn off his ichi. The world was obviously not coming to an end. I'm falling for Naruto. The words were softer this time, more of a groan. Raking her nails through her hair, she stared at her ceiling. What was she going to do? Rubbing her temples, she found herself going back over her pitiful circular logic. The answers weren't appearing out of thin air, and there wasn't a textbook to tell her what to do. In the past, when she had had trouble with her fear for Sasuke, she had drilled her anxiety into her training and sometimes into sparse conversations with Naruto. Naruto. Oh gods. She could just imagine having this conversation with him. Blanching at the thought, she fisted her hands into her own hair and tugged. This wasn't working. What she needed was a mission. A mission. Perking up at the thought, Sakura quickly pulled on a pair of sandals and headed for the Hokage's office. Surely Tsunade would think getting some exercise and some mission pay into her account was going to be a great idea. Sakura hefted the bundle of medical scrolls she had decided to return to the library. It was on her way to bullying Tsunade into letting her on a mission, and now as good a time as any to deal with the large stack that had been accumulating on her bookshelf. Laying the pile on a table, she rolled her neck as she attempted to decide which scrolls she should put back first. Sakura-san, I didn't expect to find you here. Hinata's quiet voice was a welcome surprise, and Sakura turned with a smile. The Hyuga was standing with her own scrolls firmly tucked under her arm. She was in casual clothing and had a slightly uncertain smile on her face, but her expression was welcoming. Hinata, I haven't seen you months. Things have been a bit busy, the other ninja agreed. Sakura almost snorted. Busy was an understatement. The Hyuga had been waging a silent political war inside her clan, and for most of it she had had nothing more than the unwavering support of her cousin. Speaking of, Niji let you out of the house alone? Not exactly, Hinata muttered, her voice exasperated. Hello, Sakura-san. Sakura turned her head and found herself studying Niji's familiar, handsome profile. He seemed relaxed, but there was the faintest hint of heated air, which suggested he had been using chakra recently. Niji, Sakura murmured. Turning, tilted her head at Hinata's scrolls. Do you need any help finding anything? Oh, Hinata said. No. I have everything I needed. Sakura shrugged. I have spent enough time in this place to know where most anything is. Let me know if you ever need help finding something, okay? Thank you, Sakura-san. You're welcome. Perhaps I'll see you around. Sakura smiled. I hope so. It was entirely unlikely that she would see anything of Hinata until the clan issues settled. She nodded at Niji. Good day, Sakura-san. Niji murmured, tilting his head towards the door, his eyes locking on Hinata's. She shook her head in obvious amusement before bowing. Niji mimicked her movements, and they turned and silently left the library. Sakura pursed her lips before returning to her own pile of books. There wasn't anything she could do to help them at the moment. Best to handle her end with Naruto, and then let things work out as they would for everyone else. But first, she needed a mission so she could think. Sand? Sakura repeated, her eyes wide. You want me to go to Sand? With Naruto? To watch the Jonin trials? Tsunade lifted a brow, her arms crossed under her ample cleavage. Do I need to have your ears checked out, Sakura? My hearing is fine, Sakura said with scowl. I just don't understand the request. You haven't let any of us further than half a day's run from the village in weeks. Since my own trials, she added mentally. Tsunade looked at her for a long moment before she nodded to the door. Lock it. Sakura blinked at her in surprise before moving to do as the Hokage had requested. Under her fingers the door warmed for a moment as the lock kicked into place. Sit down, Sakura. Sakura did as she was bid, her teeth tucked around her lip. She could only think of a handful of times Tsunade had locked the door, and only one other time had she been on this side of it. It was the day she had told her where to find Sasuke. I need Naruto to be out of the village for an extended period of time. Sakura stared at her for a long time. There were two reasons that she could think of that Tsunade would rather have Naruto out of the village than in it, and she didn't like either of them. Sensei? Tsunade's long fingers folded together, and when she spoke again, her voice held a note that formed a knot in Sakura's gut. Do you remember the details of Gaara's capture? Yes. How could she forget? They had been burned into her brain by the soft tones of his sister that night she struggled to heal Kankuro. The way the Kazekage had protected his own and in the process, had lost his life. Licking dry lips, she stared at her master. That would never work with Naruto. Tsunade frowned. Perhaps. Sakura shook her head. No. It wouldn't. The village might not like Naruto, all of them anyway, but they would never allow a single Akatsuki to humiliate them in that way. But what if they could draw Naruto out of this village and into another village that he felt strong ties to? Sakura stared at her. The story of Naruto's bridge has done much good over the years, but I am afraid it won't do him any favors with the Akatsuki. Tsunade said in a calm voice. Kakashi has reason to believe that they will strike soon, Sakura, and Naruto must be far enough that he will not know of the attack until he cannot try to help. Are you certain? No. Tsunade admitted. Nothing is certain, I am afraid. There is always the possibility that this is an elaborate scheme to attack Naruto while he goes to Sand, but I don't believe they know Naruto's friendship with Gaara well enough to suspect that I would send him to Sand for this. Why me? Because between you and Sasuke, the council will only allow me to send you. Sasuke may be suitable for hunting Sound, but they see no reason to send him to another village and risk you two leaving him there in some misguided sense of loyalty. Sasuke is ours. And you are Leaf's, Tsunade said firmly. Her expression softened a little. Think of it this way, Sakura. If something happens out there, who better to have here to come after you? Lacing her fingers together, Sakura sighed. Naruto won't forgive us if something happens to that village, and he was deliberately taken away to keep from protecting them. Naruto is shinobi and he will take his orders the same as you, Tsunade said flatly. The council has demanded the right to see into this Jounin class and I have no reason to turn them down. Naruto is my first choice to go to Sand and you are my second. This is a direct order, and if either of you breach it, I will put you both in a holding cell for 6 months. Do I make myself clear? Sakura nodded. We're going to Sand. Sakura turned, fingers adjusting the straps of her pack along her shoulders. You are the only person I know how is actually happy to go into the desert. Even if it is in the middle of winter, it's still the desert. Naruto laced his fingers behind his head and gave her his most winning smile. Sand is very pretty, Sakura-chan. She lifted both brows. I beg your pardon? Naruto waved one hand along lazily. You'll see. I'll show you. Giving him a suspicious look, she shook her head. Only you, Naruto. How pissed was Sasuke at being left behind? Naruto paused from where he was adjusting his own back. A wrinkle formed between his brows. He seemed okay with it. Sakura blinked. Huh? Naruto nodded, a curious expression on his face. Yeah. Do you think he is planning something? Sakura gave him a dirty look. Naruto. This is Sasuke. When is he not planning something? Naruto's smile turned sheepish. Okay. Do you think he is planning something that has to do with us? Always, Sakura said with a roll of her eyes. The question simply becomes how much can he accomplish behind our backs in the time we are going to be gone. Naruto was silent for a long time. Do you think we can get back home before a week's out? Not even if we ran ourselves into exhaustion. His crooked smile spoke volumes. Well, maybe we should try. Sakura considered his words before shaking her head. Even if we could get back in time to spoil his plan, you know he will have figured out several contingencies to keep us busy until whatever he has finished is over. Best to just hope for the best and figure out why exactly Tsunade wanted us to go on this mission. She turned her eyes away from him. Yeah, about that. We better get moving, Sakura said firmly, meeting his eyes with hers. It's a long run to Sand. Naruto's brows were tucked together, and she could read the suspicion in his eyes clearly, but she couldn't deal with it. Not now. Taking a deep breath, she pushed herself into the trees and pushed off from the branch. Her fingers didn't relax on the straps of her pack until she heard Naruto behind her. Tsunade drummed her fingers on her desk, studying the contents of her small teacup. Shizen had changed the cups out again. Surely she didn't expect her to drink less if the cup was smaller? Eventually she would just get bored and use the jug. Sighing, she poured as much sake as she dared into the tiny thing and watched the contents. As Hokage, she couldn't start drinking out of the jug until the last of her appointments had finished. Scowling again, she didn't bother to look up when the door opened. "You're late." "HN." Shaking her head, she looked up and studied the Uchiha in front of her. "Where is the other one?" "Surely you weren't about to compare me to my wayward student?" a voice from her right questioned. "You'll be lucky if that's the least of my comparisons, Kakashi," Tsunade warned as she downed the contents of the small teacup. She studied the cup for a long moment before sighing. "What do you have for me?" "That Akatsuki are nowhere near Leaf," Kakashi said mildly. "We knew that. Go on." "Pakin informs me that Sakura and Naruto will reach Sand by morning." "Quick." "Quicker than if they had been moving at a regular pace," Kakashi agreed. "It's almost as if one of them was worried about something." Tsunade took another drink, ignoring his jab. "Sakura might be mine now, but she was yours first. I imagine she has developed a thorough dislike of being late." Sasuke snorted. "Do you have something to add?" Tsunade questioned, pinning Sasuke with her eyes. "It is done." Tsunade studied him for a long moment. "You are sure your information is correct?" "Niji verified it," Sasuke said mildly. "When the time comes, they will vote as I asked." A faint smile curled the edges of his mouth. Yes. Tsunade was fairly sure he was correct. They would vote the direction the young Uchiha had required, but only partially because of the information he was currently blackmailing them with. It was the eyes, she decided. Not so much the fact that they were so dark it was difficult to read them, but the way he watched you from them. As if he could strip the flesh from your bones with just his eyes and was just waiting for the chance to do so. Good. Perhaps we can have this cleared up before Naruto and my pupil return. Tsunade sighed. Will you fight the council if we lose? Kakashi questioned. His voice was at his most mild, and Tsunade had learned a long time ago that it was also when he was his most dangerous. It will depend. But if things go that badly, I expect you two to get to Sand to stay there. Ah. That is a direct order, Kakashi. Tsunade informed him. One that neither of you will be able to afford disobeying. Yes, Hokage-sama. She snorted. Don't give me that crap. I don't fully expect things to go that far either. The young Hyuga has her clan firmly in hand, and the rest of the council will be hard-pressed to vote against my proposal without support. There will be trouble, Sasuke said. Yes. She pursed her lips. Even when my proposal passes, there will be unrest. You had best watch your back, Sasuke. Yours and your team's. The young man nodded. Well, if that's all, Kakashi said cheerfully, pulling out a familiar book. I have some reading to catch up on. Not in my office, Tsunade said firmly. Both of you out. A shadow detached itself from the Hokage's tower, moving swiftly through Konoha. A smaller, quicker shadow quickly followed. Don't worry. Pakin will follow him easily enough. They will make their move soon. Tsunade is wrong. They will strike at you first. Perhaps. My reputation speaks for itself, so they will be wary. You are still young and stupid. HN. Go home. Get some sleep. They can't touch Naruto where he is. Kakashi crinkled his good eye. In fact, I doubt anyone would want to take Naruto and Gaara at the same time. I am not worried about Naruto, Sasuke said. Sakura will be fine. She had a nasty right hook, even without chakra. HN. She got you with that one, did she? The grass had given away to rocky sand hours ago, and they were finally reaching the border of sand. It stretched out in front of her for hours, and she wondered once again how anyone could choose to live in this place. Tilting her head, she studied Naruto. There was a curious half-smile playing on his lips, as if something inside him connected to this landscape. She wondered what he saw that she didn't. How is this beautiful? He turned, and behind his eyes she thought she saw something wild. Then it was gone, and she was facing her Naruto again. He smiled. I promised I'd show you. Crossing her arms, she stared at him. The smile grew and he pointed. We have company. Turning, Sakura lifted a hand in greeting to the familiar faces. She hadn't seen Kankuro or Temari since they had brought Gaara back, and she was pleased to see that they were both doing all right. They would have heard otherwise, but there was never a guarantee that the ninja you met would be around to see again after such an extended period of time. Of course, most of those ninjas didn't have Gaara as a brother either. It's about time you got here. We expected you 2 days ago, Temari said as she approached. Sakura and Naruto exchanged confused glances. Huh? Don't mind her, Kankuro said, fingers fiddling with something at his waist. She's just bitter it's you two and not that strange-haired Nin who usually comes instead. Sakura looked at Naruto. Shikamaru Naruto mouthed, ducking to one side to avoid Temari's punch and wiggling his fingers in a way that was clearly supposed to represent something, she just couldn't figure it out. Rolling her eyes, she bowed. Thank you for welcoming us at your borders. Temari returned the bow. Sand welcomes you in friendship. Kankuro bowed as well, a slight smile on his mouth. Welcome to Sand, Naruto-san, Sakura-san. There was a casual warmth in Kankuro's voice that hadn't been there at their last meeting, and Sakura pulled herself out of her bow curiously, but he had already moved away. Shrugging, she adjusted her pack and went to follow. Tilting her head to order Naruto into moving, she was startled at the narrow-eyed, faintly hostile expression on his face. Naruto? He jerked around and offered her a careless smile. Come on, Sakura-chan, I bet Gaara hasn't had ramen in weeks. Temari turned, her eyes dancing. You didn't really bring that stuff, did you? Naruto's smile was bright. Gaara said he liked it. He pointed a finger at Sakura. Aren't you always telling me to make good diplomatic relations? Sakura opened her mouth and then closed it. You know what, Naruto? I just don't want to know. Widening her stride, she caught up with Kankuro. I'll be over here. Having an adult conversation. Kankuro kept walking, but the corner of his mouth twitched. What makes you think my conversation is adult? Sakura leaned forward and offered him her best Sasuke smile. Is that a dare? Kankuro's eyes slid over and his mouth opened, but before he could open it, a small pebble bounced off his head. Twisting around, both ninja looked at Temari and Naruto, who were watching them with expressions layered in innocence. Kankuro gave a long-suffering sound. So, Sakura-san, what would you like to know? Her smile was sharp. Why, Kankuro-kun, I thought you would never ask. Naruto folded his hands behind his head and cut Temari a sly look. Shikamaru, huh? Temari's lips twitched. You keep that up, and I'll be the first to tell my brother that she is single. Naruto's teeth clicked together audibly. Reaching over, Temari patted him on the head. Good boy. Sakura relaxed, staring into the bustling of the city. It had taken her most of yesterday to feel comfortable in the sand. Footing here was different. You weren't able to plant yourself and take a stand like at home. Sand Nin shifted about and around each other smoothly, as if they had somehow managed to incorporate the earth to their advantage. To her utter disgust, Naruto had managed it too. It's like walking on water. Sakura turned, her expression blank. What? Walking, he said, a slow smile curling the edges of his mouth. It's like you're on water. You were terrible at walking on water. But I'm good at it now, he returned. Clasping his hands behind his head, he grinned. You like it here, right? It's interesting. You can do better than that, Naruto scolded, eyes laughing at her. Sakura narrowed her eyes. Before she could speak up, a voice cut through their banter. Are you two always like this? Temari asked, hand shielding her eyes as she walked over. Only when he is being annoying, Sakura said cheerfully. Naruto made a wounded face. I'm hurt, Sakura-chan. I'm never annoying. Except when you are. If I was a lesser man, I would pout. Shaking her head, Sakura turned her back to him and faced Temari. How many will be taking the test? Enough to keep you here longer than expected, Temari said with a shrug. Gaara has the list. Which is why I came down here. He would like to speak to both of you, in his office. Playing message girl? Naruto questioned, a cheeky smile on his face. Keeping the strange Nin out of trouble, Temari returned. Tsunade feels that you need a babysitter, and Gaara agreed. I just got stuck with the short stick. Sakura rolled her yes. And you said we were bad. I can only speak the truth, Temari said pleasantly. I'll be sure to pass that along to Shikamaru, Sakura said as she followed the Sand Nin. He appreciates truth. Temari smiled, showing off her teeth. You do that. Sakura, Naruto whispered. You sure that's a good idea? Shikamaru could use a little excitement, Sakura returned with a shrug. He gets bored easily. No, Naruto corrected with a laugh. He just doesn't bother with anything too troublesome. Sakura winked at him. I think trouble might have just found him, anyway. Naruto was silent before he grinned. I win. She stopped and stared at him. What? Niji and I have a bet. Niji and you? Yup. And I win. Win what? Naruto just grinned. Hey, are you two coming or not? Yes, Sakura called back as she grabbed Naruto's arm. Win what? It's just a little something between me and Niji, Naruto informed her, eyes dancing. Don't worry about it. I'm going to beat you so hard. That Tsunade has to put me in traction. I know. Sakura lowered her lashes. Are you mocking me? We are here, Temari said loudly as she opened the door. I would never mock you, Naruto said, eyes wide, and his hand pressed over his heart as they walked into the room. You hit too hard. Do I even want to know? Gaara questioned. Sakura looked over at him, but his features gave nothing away. They have been doing this since we started walking, Temari informed her brother. We should probably let them fight it out. Put them out on display for the village. Show off the strength of our allies. Sakura took a deep breath before bowing to the Kazekage. Thank you for the hospitality of Sand. Gaara returned the motion with a half bow. Sand welcomes you. Naruto leaned forward, a wide grin on his face. I brought ramen. Interest sharpened his eyes and Sakura bit down on a groan when she realized Naruto had been telling the truth. It had to be a Jinchuriki thing. Lacing her fingers behind her back to keep from smacking Naruto in the back of his blonde head, she took a deep breath. Reaching into her pack, she pulled out the scroll that Tsunade had requested she deliver. Naruto tilted his head. Did I know you had that? No, Sakura said mildly. You didn't. Gaara accepted the scroll with a nod, before his eyes went back to Naruto. You will have dinner with me. Temari leaned forward and whispered. You're with me. Sakura's lips twitched. You think it's a good idea to leave those two alone? Better than being forced to sit next to them while they try to out-eat each other in some strange, male bonding. Temari muttered. Sakura hesitated and then shrugged. Sure. Better than ramen. Naruto turned and faced the two women, his expression suspicious. Nothing is better than ramen. Sakura sighed heavily. See what I have to deal with? Right. Temari muttered. I thought I had it bad. Hey. How was dinner with Temari? Naruto asked as he joined her the next morning, his expression curious. She had already been asleep by the time he had gotten back to his quarters. How was dinner with Gaara? Sakura shot back, adjusting the slightly large tunic that Temari had lent her. Naruto was wearing a similar shirt, and for once Sakura didn't feel like her skin was shriveling up and fleeing internally. Ah well. Such was the desert she supposed. Naruto studied her out of the corner of his eyes. You didn't do girly things all night, did you? Did you belch and scratch yourself and talk about all the strong ninja you had killed? Sakura returned with a raised brow, the corner of her lips twitching. Right. Naruto muttered. Clearing his throat, he offered her his best we behaved ourselves, really smile. Would you believe me if I said we talked politics? Sakura laughed. Only if it was the politics of overtaking the ramen market. We're not that bad, Naruto scolded, his own eyes laughing. His eyes grew serious, even though his smile stayed the same. We did actually talk about a few things. Other than ramen? Other than ramen. Naruto agreed, shaking his head. Walking over, Sakura slipped her arm through his and smiled at him. I know. Sometimes it's just too easy to tease you. You should be careful, Sakura-chan, Naruto warned as they began their walk to the testing grounds. One day I might just take you seriously. I'm sure I'll think of something when that happens and surprise you. She teased. You might be the #1 unpredictable ninja, but I've had years to watch you. I'll keep that in mind, he promised. His eyes moved away from her smile and back towards the landscape in front of them. We should probably figure out what we are both going to be taking mental notes on. Sakura nodded. There isn't going to be a lot of genjutsu used, I don't think. It's possible they have a talented chunin or two, but we would have heard of something through the rumor mills. Yeah. But they are going to have a lot of precise chakra use, Naruto pointed out. Kankuro is a good example of what they can do. Maximum bang for minimum effort. They are a lot better at it than we are, the village as a whole. Sakura admitted. I'll be able to follow what they are doing with their chakra and how it's different than what even Sensei and I do, if you can make some mental notes on what techniques they are using that we haven't seen before. I can do that, Naruto assured her. Shall we compare notes on our way back to Konoha? We'll have to, Sakura said. We can't write anything down, even to give it to Sensei. Everything has to stay here, she tapped his temple for emphasis. Or else we breach our treaty. Naruto blinked at her. Then why send me? Sakura tilted her head. Because you need the practice. He stared at her for a long moment before blinking and smiling, his eyes lighting up bright enough that her chest tightened. Thanks, Sakura. For what? For believing in me, he said simply. She snorted, wrapped her fingers around his and squeezing. Sasuke and I both believe in you, Naruto. I know. It's just nice to hear it sometimes. Well, don't expect it often. Your head would get so big it would explode if we told you all the time. She poked him in the ribs. Then what would happen? Naruto slime. His tone was solemn. EW. It wouldn't be that bad, Sakura-chan. I'd bet I would be very nicely colored slime. I could even live in your bathroom, free of charge. Naruto. Aw, don't imp. Naruto leaned over his gut where she had punched him. Sakura, he gasped. You better hurry, Sakura informed him as she continued to walk, or you're going to be late. Sakura. She just waved over her shoulder. Sakura sighed, running her fingers through her damp hair. Diplomatic status had given them longer shower time, but she and Naruto had been switching who had a shower on what day to keep from taxing Sans resources. They could always drown themselves when they got back to Konoha after all. Leaning against the window in her room, she studied the streets of Suna at night. It wasn't home, but Naruto was right. There was a strange, almost alien sort of attraction to the place. Although she would never actually tell the blonde that, a half-smile lifted the edges of her mouth into a smile, and she pressed her face against the glass and closed her eyes. The quiet of night here was relaxing, but it did nothing to distract her from the insanity of her thoughts. Naruto had questioned her that morning if she was sleeping, and she had stubbornly ignored him. If she said no, there was little chance her would believe her if she cited the new location of sand as the reason. She had slept fine the last time she was here. No. This entire problem was quite squarely Naruto's fault. She just couldn't stop analyzing every movement she and Naruto had made around each other since Sasuke came back. Opening her eyes, she stared blindly down at sand. Logically, Sakura. Go about this logically. Lowering her hand, she smiled somewhat ruefully. It wasn't like she was going to be getting a lot of sleep tonight anyway. At least tomorrow she could just tell Naruto she had been over-analyzing the Jounin trials they had been watching. That was truth enough. Settling her shoulder against the wall, she stared at the window. Was he in love with her? She knew there was attraction, those half-kisses and real kisses had said enough. The way his eyes would sometimes burn, as if he was holding something back and that it was almost too much for him, well, attraction meant lust, and she had already admitted she wanted to jump his bones. She also knew she was far too emotionally involved to sleep with him without some assurances that he was serious about this. A rueful smile curved her lips. Not that Naruto wouldn't be serious about it. When it came to his friends and those he cared about, he was ruthless in making sure they were happy. It was why he was going to be such a good Hokage. Pushing her hands through her bangs, she stared gloomily through the night. So that meant that her problem were her rules and not Naruto. Her carefully formed and decided rules that had been in place for years on how to deal with Naruto. She wasn't willing to break them. She had already made that mistake with Sasuke, giving too much of herself where it wasn't wanted until she had to dig her heels in and fight to earn the trust she deserved as his teammate. She loved Sasuke. She really, truly did. She just wasn't in love with him. She didn't regret where she was with him. His friendship and his quiet confidence at her back were wonderful. He made her happy the way he was. Naruto with Naruto she wanted more. Yet she was so terrified of losing him to her stupidity. Losing Naruto, her breath hitched, and she swallowed. Losing Naruto was unacceptable. Sasuke, he was a missing piece that made her feel whole and safe and complete. It was like losing a limb and finding it was suddenly there again, working and strong. Losing Naruto would be much, much worse. Especially if it was her fault. Shoulder rounding with exhaustion, she admitted to herself that the crux of the problem, Naruto's ability to forgive, was almost endless. Almost. If she managed to screw up in such a way he was forced to choose between their friendship and whatever was delicately growing between them, there would be no going back. She wasn't sure there would be a second chance. Yet he had kissed her. He had watched her with those eyes that were almost starved, had held her hand and picked her up and slept on her couch for no other reason than it was her couch. Had given her his bed when she needed it and the comfort of his presence. He had been her best friend since before she had even realized who he was as a person. Rubbing her temples, she sighed. So she had two choices. The first was to walk away from what was between them, to hide behind a facade of friendship and pray that Naruto would eventually let what was between them go. The other was to take the risk, to grasp it with both hands and find out what was going on and what she wanted. Biting her lip, she took a deep, even breath. She wasn't a coward, and she had sworn that she would never back out of battle ever again. If this was a battlefield, well, didn't they compare love to war? Now all she had to do was figure out how to tell him that she was open to his advances. Looking out the window, she physically started to see Naruto and Gaara standing in the street. One hand was behind Naruto's head and the other was waving to prove a point. The sight of the two ninjas had her breath catching in her throat, and Sakura swallowed. Maybe she was just going to go blunt with this one. Naruto had never been too particularly good about picking up subtle messages anyway. Naruto slung his hands behind his head, feeling very satisfied. Cutting his eyes to the man next to him, he considered the Kazekage. Gaara, for his part, was ignoring him, although the corner of one mouth twitched a little, as if he was attempting to hide his own amusement. Like that would work. He could read Sasuke, after all, and while the lack of eyebrows did manage to keep his expression bland, there were other ways to see things. Like that fact that his hands were loose at his side and the edges of his mouth were deep enough to be a smile. Sort of. If he squinted really hard. Your face is going to get stuck like that. Everyone keeps saying that, Naruto complained. Gaara said nothing, but his shoulder twitched, as if he was laughing. Bastard. Turning his eyes back to the desert night, Naruto smiled to himself. I told Sakura this place was beautiful. There was a hesitation, a slight shift in intensity. Oh? Naruto grinned again. She didn't believe me. Gaara shrugged. Not many see it. Naruto gave his own shrug. I told her I would show it to her. Gaara's eyes cut over. Did you? Rolling his eyes, Naruto flung a hand out and drove a knuckle into the stoic man's arm. Just because you're Kazekage and I'm the future Hokage doesn't mean I won't kick your ass. Sand shifted around them, but Gaara's mouth had twisted into something resembling a smile. It was slightly creepy, but was a much better version of a smile than he had seen the last time he had talked to him. Is that a challenge? Naruto thought about it, and then shook his head. Nah. Sakura would kill me if she caught us brawling. This time, it was a real smile, and Naruto narrowed his eyes. That wasn't exactly a polite smile, now that he thought about it. What? Gaara's eyes flickered over and above him, and Naruto lifted his head. To his surprise, he caught a flash of pink before the figure moved away from the window. Hey, I wonder what she is doing still awake. Gaara was silent, so Naruto turned back and blinked at the expression on his friend's face. Well, the lack of expression. Have you told her yet? All the teasing left him, and he shoved his hands in his pockets, his eyes moving away from Gaara and back to the streets. No. HN. Trying for a smile, Naruto shrugged. You saw her at the trials. Would you want to try something she didn't like with that punch? Gaara's expression didn't change. When he finally spoke, his words were careful. I think I would be lucky to find someone willing to look past this. His fingers moved a little, and Naruto's shoulders rounded. Yeah. I know. Yet you hesitate. It's Sakura. Perhaps you should tell her that. You know, between you and Sasuke, I really don't feel like I get to make any of these decisions on my own. Gaara started walking again. Try living with Temari. Naruto was silent, and then he grinned. I see your point. Go away, Naruto. Rolling his eyes, Naruto stretched his neck, feeling a few of the vertebrae pop. He hesitated for a moment, and then turned on his heel. He wondered if Sakura was up for some conversation. Shikamaru studied the papers in front of him, a faint frown tugging at the edges of his mouth. Shikamaru studied the papers in front of him, a faint frown tugging at the edges of his mouth. Sighing heavily, he crossed his arms and looked back up to the very troublesome woman that had become his Hokage. These midnight meetings were really starting to become bothersome. Are you sure this is correct? Our sources are impeccable, Tsunade assured him. She poured sake into 2 very tiny cups. Sake? Ignoring the offer, he stared back at the documents in front of him. Shikamaru could already feel the headache forming behind his eyes. He shuffled the papers in front of him before reading them over for the 3rd time. Akatsuki. Fingers clenching, he swallowed his instinctive hatred of that group. The very idea that any of the council would be willing to make a deal with them to sell out Naruto, even for the promise of immunity for the village, infuriated him. Are you wanting to shake down the council? Yes, Tsunade said. Do you have a problem with that? Pushing his anger down to be dealt with later, he concentrated on the facts. He could feel his eyes trying to cross with the effort to organize the information that had just been dumped in his lap. It shouldn't have surprised him that Team 7, troublemakers all of them, was in the middle of this, but the links to the Hyuga clan were a bit more complicated. Scratching his jaw, he sighed. How troublesome.